Так. Так. Это не надо, это не надо. Это тоже не надо. Это тоже не надо. И это не надо. Вот это надо. И вот это надо. Так, Викту. А зачем на форум? Старт. И все. Сейчас 5 минут начну. Здорово, здорово. Ну чё, сейчас начинаем минутку через 2-3. У меня что-то счетчики пока не обновляются. Беспредел.
Okay, so now that you've learned how to create classes and objects, in this video we're going to show you a really powerful way of reasoning about your code and about the variables in your code that's called drawing memory models.
Чё? Забыл Соника. Да нет, Соника не буду подрубать, он много ресурсов жрет. Слишком много. Сколько стоит? Ноут устарел. Да не, просто Соник такой прожорливый. Написано, которая мусорная. С нее оплачу.
So by the end of this video, you'll be able to draw memory models for variables that contain primitive type data like ints and doubles and floats. And you'll be able to update those memory models to reason about the values of those variables in your code as your code runs to try to figure out what is your code actually doing. Now, this is a really interactive lesson. So we want you to get out your pencil, get out your paper, and draw these memory models right along with us. Now, when I ask my students to get out pencil and paper in class, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy, like this is computer science. Why do I need a pencil and a piece of paper? And I actually usually walk around the room and say, hey, get out your pencil, get out your paper. Now, obviously I can't do that with you, but if it helps, imagine me kind of knocking on your door, knocking on your car window, asking you to get out your paper and your pencil to draw these memory models right along with us. It'll be a lot more interesting and you'll learn the concepts a lot better. So to warm us up, let's look at this piece of code. And what I'd like you to do is just trace through this code and tell me what are the values of the variables var1 and var2 at the end of this code. In other words, what does this code print?
Ага. Так, у нас первая переменная 52 присваивается, вторая переменная равна переменной 1, то есть это равна 52. Первой переменной присваивается 127. Шесть, девять, три. Так. То есть у нас будет, вот так будет. Если бы у нас был integer, у нас были бы проблемы с этим.
All right, so if you got that example right, great job. This actually turns out to be a somewhat tricky example that a lot of people have trouble with. So if you did have a little trouble with it, don't worry, because what we're going to do now is we're going to use this example in order to illustrate this idea of drawing memory models so that you'll be able to get questions like this right forever, so for all of the future. And why is it important to be able to reason about code like this rather than just write code? Well, it turns out that people who are better at writing code are also better at reasoning about their code and vice versa. So practicing reasoning about code is a really important skill in order to become a better coder and software developer. So let's step through this code line by line and draw the memory model for this code as it runs. Let's start here on the first line. That first line is a variable declaration. What we're actually telling Java is, hey Java, I want some new space to store a value of type integer. And that space I'm going to label with the label var1. So in my memory model, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box. That represents the space that I'm going to have to represent this variable, and label it with the name of the variable. So there we go, and you should do the same on your piece of paper. The next line of code here is an assignment statement. So what that's telling Java is, hey Java, take the value on the right-hand side, which in this case is 52, and place it into the variable on the left-hand side, which in this case is var1. So in our memory model, we'll take that 52 and we'll put it in the box for var1, which is where var1 stores its value. All right, next line, another variable declaration. So we need another box labeled with the new variable name, which is var2. The next line is another assignment statement. Now this is slightly more complicated than the last assignment statement because the thing on the right-hand side is not just a number like 52. It's another variable. So what we need to do is we need to get the value out of var1 so we can then place that value into the variable var2. So we look in the box for var1. We see the value there is 52. So what we'll do is we'll copy that value over here into the variable var2. So now var1 and var2 both store the value 52. Now this is a really important point, that var1 and var2 are not the same variable. They're not tied together in any way. They just temporarily store the same value because this assignment statement told Java to take the value that's in var1 and put it into var2. But there's no connection between these two variables, which you can see in the memory model diagram. So now when we go on to the next line, which is another assignment statement, and take the value 127 and put it into var1, you will see that only the value of variable var1 will change. So I'll take that 127, replace the 52 that was already there, and the new value of var1 is 127. Now we're down here at the last line, which is this print statement, and all that's left to do is read the values out of those boxes for the variables. So when I print out var1 and var2, they'll have the values that you see in the boxes of 127 for var1 and 52 for var2, and this is what prints. So those are some simple memory models using just primitive type data, and in the next video we're going to show you how to get more complicated using objects.
Чё, понеслась. %, опять 5 надо. Вы получили прекрасную возможность выбрать одну из частей потоков курса. Следующие 2 видео будут давать вам практику рисования моделей памяти, примитивных типов и запуска примеров этого видео на Eclipse. Если вы чувствуете себя комфортно и можете видеть далеко, мы рекомендуем пропустить здесь эти видео и двигаться к следующему курсу. Пропустить. Я сдал. Ура!
What we get to do in this video is take the concepts that you talked about with Christine and apply them in an example so we can really work through them together and see how they help us step by step. So the key concept that we're going to be developing and thinking about here is that of memory models, and we're going to see how they apply for this code snippet that we'll trace through now. So let's think about what happens in the first line of code. First things first. And in this first line of code, we both have a variable being declared and then a value being assigned to that variable. So in our memory model, whenever we have a new variable, we want to denote that by writing the name of that variable. And then drawing a box where we'll record the value of the variable. Okay. So we've drawn var1, we've drawn that in our memory model, we've got a box for it, and the value that's being assigned is the right-hand side of the equals over there, which is 17. And so we put that in the box. Cool. Now we can move on to the second line, and in the second line, well, we're declaring a new variable, so we have to update our memory model, which means that we need to write var2, our new variable that we just declared, and give it a box as well. And now we think about what goes into this box, and we look at the right-hand side of the assignment statement, and the right-hand side of the assignment statement says we want the value of var1 plus 1. But the value of var1 is recorded in our handy memory model right over here at 17. And so we want to remember for the current system.out, and then I'm running off the screen. So in this support video, we're going to take our work from the previous one. We've traced through some code, and right now what we'd like to do is test it and test our understanding. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to write testing code to verify the output of your trace of some Java code execution, and you'll be able to use Eclipse to run that code. So make sure that you've got Eclipse open and we can work together as we're developing the testing code. So we start with an example, and this is a piece of code that we used in the previous video, and we've used memory models to understand and to conjecture what's going to happen at the end of running this code. So doing that, if you think back to the previous video, you saw that we used check. What it means is that our code needs to be in a class, because in Java everything is in classes. And so we can create a new file in Eclipse and call that file, for example, int assignment tester.java. Tester is indicating to ourselves that this is a testing class. And so we define a new class, public class int assignment tester. Remember that the class name has to match the file name. And then in the main method for that class, we stick the code that we want to test. Because when we run this class, when we run the code for this class, we know that the main method is going to be what's being executed. Okay, so we've defined this new file, we've put the code that we want to test into the main method, and now in Eclipse we can run the code. Or code will be...
Давайте какую-нибудь задачку. Working код. Что, вы открыли Eclipse, чтобы открыть видео в этом модуле? Нет? Но он сейчас будет гореть красненьким. Вы сдали. Все правильно.
All right, something I struggled with when I was learning computer science, and also I still really kind of struggle with it today, is just simply compiling and running and testing my code. I'm not really sure why, but when I started out programming, I was just terrified to compile and I was terrified to run because I was so afraid of the errors that were going to be in my code. And of course, we all have errors in our code, but it was a visceral fear. And I always thought, oh my God, like the computer's going to explode or something, and I would just not do it. So it would lead me to write these huge methods and these huge programs before I compiled or ran anything. And it was a big mistake. So I got over that just by kind of practicing more, hitting that compile button and the run button, and realizing that nothing happens. Your code breaks and you fix it, and it's not a big deal. So that's what I've learned. But you know, it's still kind of scary for me sometimes.
Миш себе язык по девкам выбирает.
So in the last video, we drew memory models using only primitive type data. In our case, last time it was integers. But this time we're going to add objects into our memory models. So our goals for this video are the same basically as the last time, only this time you'll be able to draw memory models using object type data and primitive type data, and reason about code that uses both primitives and objects. So before we begin, let's just give an example of the two different types of data. You're probably already familiar with this from your earlier courses in Java, or courses in Java. The Java has two fundamentally different kinds of data. It has primitive kinds of data, which consist of only 8 types. So Boolean, byte, short, int, long, float, double, and char. Those are the 8 primitive types of data in Java. Everything else is an object, whether it's an array or a user-defined class or a class that you find in a library. Everything else is an object. So obviously learning how to add objects into our memory models is going to be really important for reasoning about code. So here's a short snippet of code right there, just 2 lines that show an example of both the primitive type, the integer, and an object type, which is our class simple location, which we defined in the last lesson. We're going to reason through a short snippet of code that combines both integers, primitives, and these objects of type simple location. We're going to step through this code the same way we did in the last video and draw the memory model as we go. So to get things started, we've got a nice, easy variable declaration and assignment statement. And you already know how to handle this one. This is just an integer, just like we looked at before. var1, we create a box, we put the value of the variable in the box. In this case, it's 52. So that was easy, no problem. Let's go on to the next line. The next line turns out is pretty easy as well. All it is a variable declaration. So we handle this in the same way, regardless of the fact that it's actually an object type variable. That doesn't matter for our variable declaration. So we're going to make a box and label it with the variable's name. There it is. It's this next line where things get interesting. This is an assignment statement. And what we're doing is we're creating a new instance or a new object of type simple location. And then we're setting the value UCSD equal to whatever happens when we create that new object. So now to understand what's going on here and how it's going to affect our memory model, we need to look a little more closely at what happens when we create a new object in Java and what's going on in your computer's memory. So when we say new simple location, what Java's doing is it's creating a new object, which means it's allocating some space in your computer's memory to store that object. So let's take a closer look. What it's doing is creating that object, which is allocating some space, and it's doing that in a part of your computer's memory called the heap. So it creates that new object in the heap. And then what it does is it puts that object at some location in the heap that has some address. It's not necessarily, we don't know where Java chooses to create that object. So we'll just represent that address where Java creates that object with this little @34. So that object is at location 34. That's just a random number that I picked off the top of my head. It's wherever Java happened to create that object in the heap. So now what happens is, when we've created that new object and Java creates it at location 34, what it actually does is it doesn't place the whole object inside the box for UCSD. It places a reference to that object in the box for UCSD. In other words, it places the location of the object, wherever it's stored in the heap, into the box for UCSD. And that's called a reference. So now I said 34 is just kind of a made-up number. I don't necessarily know that this simple location object exists at the location 34. So typically in my memory model diagrams, rather than making up arbitrary locations for all of my objects, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arrow from the box for the variable UCSD to the object that's created in the heap. But remember that this arrow really just represents this reference, this number that represents the address, or something like an address, of where to find this newly created object in the heap. So it's actually a number in the box, but that number effectively represents the location of the object in memory, so we draw an arrow from the box to that location in memory. And that arrow is actually the value of the variable UCSD. All right, so now we've got our new object. We've got the value of UCSD, which is a reference to that newly created object in memory. Now let's look a little bit closer at what that object looks like over there in memory. So this class simple location has two member variables, and both of these member variables are stored inside the object. So we can open up that object, look inside, and we can see that inside we actually have two variable declarations. There's latitude and longitude. So we're going to draw boxes just like we did before with that integer var1. We'll create a box for latitude and a box for longitude and label them both with their names. Those boxes are going to store the values of latitude and longitude when that object is created. And where do they get their values? Well, they get them from the constructor. Those values that get passed in are the values that go into the latitude and longitude variables inside that object, which is over there in the heap. So this is the complete memory model after these first three lines of code. We've got our primitive variable var1 storing the value 52. We've got our object type variable UCSD, which stores a reference, which is essentially just a number representing the location of this newly created object in memory, which we represent in our memory model diagram as an arrow. And then we have our object, which has two variables inside of it, latitude and longitude. The next line down creates another new variable, and it creates another new object, and then we'll create a link between the two by storing the reference to the new object in the new variable. So let's take that down piece by piece. In order to draw this part of the memory model, what you would do is you would handle the declaration first, draw that box, label it with the variable's name, which is Lima, draw the new object over here in memory, put the two member variables that are inside that object as boxes labeled with their names inside the object, and then link the variable Lima to the newly created object by placing a reference inside the box for Lima, which again is the value of the variable Lima. All right, so we're almost there. This is the last line. Let's look at this last line of code, which actually changes the value of latitude inside the variable lima. So let's say, for example, we want to tweak the value of the latitude variable, make it a little more precise. What happens in our memory model when we make this change to the variable latitude inside the object lima? What Java says when it sees a statement like this, lima.latitude, what that means is it wants us to follow the arrow from lima into memory to the object it finds there and find the variable latitude inside that object. So that's how that we know we're not talking about latitude up there in the UCSD object. We're talking about latitude down in the lima object because we say lima.latitude. So we go to the box for lima, we follow the arrow, and then look in that object to find the variable latitude. We find it, and that's where that value, negative 12.04, is going to go. So we change the value of the variable latitude inside that object, and that's all there is for this code. And here we have the final memory model, representing the state of all the variables and all the memory in this code when the code is finished running. So now that you've mastered these memory models, you should be able to reason about lots of different examples involving both primitive variables and object type variables. So we've got a sequence of challenges and practice videos for you to try out your new skills.
Ура! Давайте. Что-нибудь это. Чуть-чуть осталось. Да я еще пойду утром лесопедить еще. Давай, да. Прокрастинируй там.
Welcome back. We're going to do a challenge question at this point. You've learned a great deal about memory models. Let's see if we really understand it well. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to walk through two questions. The first of which will just be a question where we stop and come back. And the second question is where we're actually going to walk through the full concept challenge procedure. Again, the procedure is you're going to pause, think about the problem, solve it yourself, discuss it potentially with other learners, watch a video of UCSD learners discussing it, and then confirm your understanding with our explanation. So first, to get things started, what I want to give you is an example piece of code. I have the simple location class that we've already been working with, and then I'm just going to create in main an example of one of those objects. So what I want you to do is pull out your pencils and paper, pause, draw the memory model as it stands right now, and then come back. So if this was the model that you drew, you were spot on. And this gives us a good starting point now for our next question. We're going to scale the question a bit. We've got a single variable now within main. We've also got two objects that we're creating within main. The question here is, what memory model is going to result? Again, pull out a piece of paper and pencil, draw this yourself, and then we'll come back together.
Hi, my name is Azil.
Чего вы вылезете?
And I'm Monica.
Я ответ хотел сделать.
Let's just get started. Okay, so far, looking at this, I noticed that there are two objects. So we can immediately cross out C.
Это вчера было, нет? Нет, вчера не было.
They both are simple location objects, so wouldn't they point
Как
to
это могло быть вчера?
a simple location inside
Если здесь по
yeah,
порядку
but
все
each one
идет.
is a new simple location, so they don't point to the same area in the heap. They point to different areas because they're both new objects. So Washington, D.C. gets its own place. Washington, D.C. gets its own place.
So there are two objects because there's two news, right?
Right.
Okay.
There's two news.
So that means C
At
is
least-
not the answer.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
But the part where I got a bit confused on was when I tried to look at each of the different locations in memory. And I understand why latitude is -12 for each one of these, but I don't really get why D doesn't point to -77, or whether it actually is just -77 in the box.
So we know that D is primitive, which means that it's just a constant number.
12 минус
So-
77.
Primitive types, which are constant numbers, do not need an
38
arrow.
минус
That's what I think.
77.
Well, why don't we need an arrow?
Ну, ответ Б. Нет?
I mean, it's inside the object's memory area.
But the item
Глянь,
itself
что я вообще
is not an
различаю,
object.
прикольно рассказываю.
Oh, okay.
Кидайте
I
в
see.
Discord.
So then you just write it directly
Яву.
into the box for both cases?
All right, now that you've heard an explanation about this from our UCSD learners, you're already seeing how this works. And really the only way to do this is to trace the code just as they did. And I'm going to do that for us here. We're going to start at the very top of main, as we always do, and we're going to have a single double variable d that's assigned the value -77. You can see that's within the scope of main in the drawing below. Then I'm going to create a reference for Lima. And just like we did at the very start here,
создал
is I'm going to
переменную
actually now
минус
create
12 минус 77.
this object. So
Потом создал
I call
переменную
new simple location that allocates space on the heap.
38,9
You
минус
see that on the right.
77.
And then I'm going to pass in as parameters -12 and -77. That's the
Хацкера.
value of d
Да.
at the time that it's passed in as a
Палец не клади никуда.
Perfect. All right. Now we can do the second piece. Now we're going to create a second object. Sorry, we're creating a reference for a second object, which is called washdc. And now I'm actually going to create the object by calling that new simple location. So again, new simple location allocates space in the heap for a new object. And I'm now going to call this method passing in these two parameters. And the key part to this problem is really what happens with lima.long. When you call a constructor and you're passing these values
Это
as
вторая
parameters,
переменная в классе.
parameters in Java are always
Вот
passed
она.
by value. So
Long.
38.9
Long.
is going to be copied over as exactly 38.9. And lima.long is going to be evaluated to be the -77 that it is. And then that -77 is what's passed for long in. Now we're going to copy the values over just like we did before. We're going to copy into this.lat. And copy into this.long.
Секрет.
And then at the very end of this constructor, we're going to hook up washdc to that long.
Все, челлендж выполнен. Все, спасибо. Следующий. Задание-то будет здесь, нет? А, вот здесь есть задание.
As we
То
continue
есть
working
я,
through
короче,
this
понял,
module,
как
it's
распределять. Здесь
important that we have
точечки
these
есть.
concept challenges. So the reason we're doing these again is that it's important to test your own understanding.
Да ты псих.
You can listen to us talk about the material, but until you've really tried to apply it, you don't know for sure whether or not you're understanding it correctly. So this is an opportunity for you to identify potential misconceptions in your understanding or to gain confidence in the fact that you're understanding it properly. Process again, we're going to pause, you're going to try to solve it yourself, you're going to discuss it with potentially other learners
И у
around
меня
you.
ничего не
You're
получилось.
gonna
Я
watch,
разделяю ваше горе.
UCSD learners talk about the concepts, and then you're going to confirm your understanding with our explanation. So the problem for this one is to walk through this code. Again, always start executing in main. At the very end of main, there's going to be a print. And the question is, what gets printed?
Ой, надо ответить, да? Старт у нас здесь. Создается переменная 39,9 и 164. Потом создается вторая 55,8 и 37,6. Log1 равняется log2. То есть у нас log1 будет теперь ссылаться на log2. То есть они обе имеют ссылку на log2. На log1 ссылка потеряна. То есть на вот этот вот объект ссылки больше не существует. Log1 let равняется минус 8,3. Let это первая переменная. Минус 8,3. Log2 let, log2 lon. Минус 8,3, 37,6. А где ответ это? Минус 8,3, 37,6. Submit. Я молодец? А, подожди. Или я не понял? А что появились еще ответы?
Hi, I'm Tanky.
Hi, I'm Peter.
А я не понял, правильно было или
Alright,
нет?
so let's go ahead.
There's what gets printed.
Можно еще раз ответить? Мы не давали ответ на этот вопрос, но вы ответили правильно? А, мы не будем говорить, является ли он правильным или неправильным. Продолжайте смотреть. Ой, секрет.
Hi,
Реально
I'm Peter.
секрет.
Hi, I'm Joe. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So
Ah.
I guess we can all agree. So location
Хреновые
1 is
преподы.
going to create a new simple location
Да.
with those values, and location 2 is going to create another simple location with those values as well.
And we're talking about
Secret.
objects right here.
Yeah.
okay.
So we're gonna have two different objects, location 1 and location 2. What I got stuck at was when location 1 equals location 2. So what I was thinking was that the values inside location 2 are actually gonna copy over into location 1.
Oh, like a whole new object?
Well, not exactly a whole new object, but just the values of the latitude and longitude into location
А
1.
что
So
решать-то?
currently,
Здесь теряется переменная
yeah,
на,
yeah.
на
So
первую
currently,
ссылку,
location 1 has 39.9
на
for
первый
the
объект.
latitude. And
Точнее,
well, I was thinking
теряется
that
ссылка.
location 2's latitude,
Че, серьезно, чуваки в
55.8
очках
would
сидят и
overwrite that.
смотрят,
Am I right?
что
Or-
объект мусор ушел?
I think those are like
Ну
two
да.
objects, right? Like they are separate. So I think the
Посплю в
third
Дискорде,
is
расскажешь.
like-
Давай.
So it won't like override like the every like member variable here,
So like rewrite the arrow instead, like where location 1 is pointing.
right?
Alright, so location 1's now going to reference to the same object that location 2 is referencing,
And you
right?
just follow the arrow.
Alright, okay. So that means that location 1's values.
Просто дальше сейчас
change,
будет
but it's just
пятичасовое
because it's
задание,
referencing
поэтому я не
the
хочу
object.
ничего пропускать.
Correct.
Yeah.
Alright, so when location 1
По крайней мере, там
gets
написано, что они
negative
пятичасовые.
8.3,
Я надеюсь, что мы за сегодня его
that means
сделаем.
that the latitude of location
После
1
последней
changes to
страницы
negative
шилта.
8.3, but since
Их одевать не
that's
надо,
the
они
same
сами вырастут.
object referenced by location 2, does that mean location 2's latitude changes to negative 8.3?
А как объяснять хранение объяснений?
Yeah,
Что
because
такое
all-
ссылка, что такое значение, сколько памяти переменная, по дефолту уже воспринимаем. Когда хоть дело до обучения, то это пипец. Ну да. Ну, я же так отвечал уже, нет? Коррект. Спасибо.
1 and 37.6.
Давай дальше.
Developing a skill of traceables. First, we'll be tracing code using the memory models that we've been talking about before for both object and primitive data. But we'll also be developing a skill of tracing code and talking about it in high-level terms beyond step-by-step what each statement does. Now, you want to make sure that you're ready to participate, get a pencil out, and work with me through this. You'll learn much better if you're working through it yourself as well. So let's start with a piece of code that we'll be thinking about and take a few seconds to read it carefully and try to explain in your own words what this piece of code does.
Скорость задания пятичасовой будет, скажу.
All right, welcome back. It's very useful to try to think about how the code and the syntax that we have in Java translate to steps
Ну, как
and procedures that
Кума-
we can understand
Кума-
as high-level human beings.
Кумамото.
So, for
Кумамото только
example,
останется,
if we're
короче,
thinking about
ссылка.
this in words, what we might say is that we have
9
created a
минут,
couple of
6 минут.
objects, and then we try to
Здесь,
assign
короче,
those
сейчас
objects
потратим
to
еще
one another.
полчаса.
When we say assign objects to one
Здесь
another,
5
that's
вопросов и
very
10 минут.
imprecise. And so this gives us
И вот здесь вот
an added
5 часов.
perspective on the benefit of tracing code and on the benefit of the precision that comes with memory models. All right, so let's see what we do when we trace the code.
Егор, ты
We
любил
remember that in
банан.
order to declare simple location type objects, what we need is to think about the simple location
Если
class.
кто-то делает
And
в
we're
коде,
using the
его
class
сразу надо
definition
развивать.
that you've seen in the core videos for this module. So you'll be fairly familiar with this definition, but you can look at it
Вполне
here as
возможно.
well. The first line of code that we have is a declaration and an assignment statement. We're reserving some
такие
space in memory. We're labeling it UCSD.
преувеличенные
What we would
примеры
like to have
какие-то.
there is a reference to a new object. That new object is of type simple location, and it's initialized using the constructor to some values. So what that means is we have a box in our memory model. It's labeled by the name of the variable UCSD, and we point to this new object that we've created.
Как что уцелел-то,
whose,
Алекс?
Instance variables, latitude and longitude, are set to 32.9 and negative 117.2 respectively. And that's all there is to that first line. So now we go on to the next line, and that next line has exactly the same form. We're declaring a variable. That variable is of type simple location. And so we have a reference to a new object. That object is being created by the constructor, and those instance variables have their own values. And notice that those instance variables for this new object are completely separate from the variables that we had for the previous object. We've constructed completely new copies of these objects. All right, now we
Всё
get
честно.
to the third line, and in this third line we're not
Блин, можно
is we're
пропущу?
saying
Ну
line
реально,
of code.
раз.
And Kumar said as
Слишком
we did
просто.
when we constructed.
Есть? Есть вопросики? Есть вопросики?
Okay, the last lesson in this module is talking about variable scope. Now, you may already be familiar with the notion of variable scope, but we're going to introduce it again because it's such an important concept. And we're going to do more than just introduce the notion of variable scope. We're going to also incorporate it into those memory models for reasoning about
Не знаю, может потом надо
So
будет
by the end
как-то
of
это
this
делать.
module, you'll be able to describe the notion of scope and Java's rules for scope, as well as draw those memory models to incorporate scope and reason about code using those memory models. So get out your pencil, get out your piece of paper, make sure you're not driving, and you'll draw these memory models right along with us. So we're starting off with a little warm-up question. I want you to look at this code. This code should look pretty familiar to you by now. And I want you to identify the 6 variables that appear in this code. So pause the video for a second, see if you can find 6 variables in this code. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you found 6 variables. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Here's the 6 variables that I found in this code. Now, you may have also identified that keyword this as a variable. It's not quite a variable. It behaves a little bit like a variable. We'll talk more about that later as we add in scope into our memory models. But here are those 6 variables. There's latitude and longitude, which are the member variables in our simple location class. There's latin and lon_in, which are the parameters to our method, to our constructor. And then over in our main method, there's lima, which is our simple location object, and then that tricky one, which is the parameter to the main method, args. So all of these variables are not necessarily created equal. So even though latitude is a variable in this code, if I try to refer to latitude over here in the main method, what do you think is going to happen? So take a minute, take a guess. What happens if I just try to directly access the variable latitude in the main method?
Что происходит вообще? Что за дичь? А, они смогут только через 10 минут писать. Это защита от спамеров. Да-да-да. Так. Что? Сейчас я посмотрю на тачки. I come back. Но только чтобы пройти собес, тебе жабисты это просто пиздец спрашивают такую дичь. Летели 2 верблюда, один рыжий, другой слева, сколько весит килограмм асфальта, если вижу 24 года. Шаблон нахуй никому не нужен. Шаблоны только псевдоменеджерам. А, нужны только псевдоменеджерам. Так, какой вопрос-то? Будет ли изменено число 12,04? Так, у нас начинается. Мы создаем какую-то лиму. Лима у нас создается минус 12, минус 77. Изменилось? Нет. Ничего не будет меняться с 12,4. Как она была, так и осталась. У нас же не в методе меняем. It will change. It will change. It was complete error. По-моему, это будет error. Потому что здесь она не определена. Но не объявлено, что это дабл какой-то. Да, да. Ну-ка проверим, насколько я тупой. Правильно, не тупой.
So if you tried this, you will have found that it caused an error. If you try to access latitude in this location, in this main method, Java is going to tell you that this variable latitude is not defined here. So this brings us to the idea of scope. The scope of a variable is the area in the code where it's defined to have a particular value. And in this case, in the main method, that variable latitude is not defined at all. It hasn't been declared here. It was declared over in the simple location class. It was one of the member variables. So I can't get at it in main. So let's talk about a few different types of variables and types of scoping rules for those variables.
Какие сложные слова вы здесь
The first kind of variable
говорите.
we're going to talk about is called a local variable. A local variable is a variable that's declared inside some method. For example, lima is a local variable. And if that variable is declared inside the method, outside of any block like an if statement or a while loop, then that variable can be used and has a particular value that you set it to all the way through that method. So in this case, I can use the variable lima anywhere inside the main method, but not outside the main method. Second kind of variable I want to talk about are parameters. Parameters are those arguments that we pass into methods, and they behave basically just like local
А, можно
variables.
уже здесь скипнуть
So this
дальше.
variable doesn't word this. Now let's take a closer look at calling
О,
object.
отлично, можно. 6 минут сэкономили. Вот лямбды и прочее
Hi, and
хуто.
welcome back
Дальше,
to our
да.
module on
Ну,
scope.
может даже, кстати, не в
It's
этом
time for
курсе,
another one
может
of
даже
these
в
concept
следующем.
challenges. Again, the flow for this is you're going to
Лямбды были
pause,
в
think up problem
шилте.
yourself. You're going to discuss this if you have other learners around you. You're going to watch the UC San Diego learners tackle the problem, and then you're going to hear
Пока
our
что то, что здесь
explanation.
написано week, мы
So the
проходим за
question here is
вечер.
going to involve
Но это,
essentially
в
two
принципе,
classes.
пока.
You've been
Я
working a
думаю,
great
дальше
deal with
будет
simple
хуже.
location, and we're going to keep using this class, and that's the one on the left. We've got a tester class on the right, and that tester class has a main method. It's within this main method where you're going to see a number of things get declared, and then something get printed. The big question is, what gets printed?
В этом курсе, кстати, по-моему, не будет лямбд. Посмотрите и скажите, что будет выведено на печать. Создали переменную 15.5. Передали переменную туды. У нас создался новый класс лима 15 минус 15.5 минус 77. Latitude изменилось на 12. Но как было 15.5, так и останется 15.5. Ничего. В смысле ничего? А, мы не скажем вам.
I'm
Я
King.
понял.
Hi, I'm Peter.
Опять 3 эксперта появились.
So what actually happens when
Нужен
we
экшон.
go back to our
Приходи тогда
main
через
method
недельку.
and we look
Я
at
думаю,
lat
через
gets
недельку
negative
будет экшон.
12.0. Is that
Пока
going
что
to
вряд ли.
change Lima's latitude value since that's what we took in as the variable?
Well, I think since we were just working with a primitive data type, then it was just like getting a copy of it, right? It wasn't like
Не
doing
подглядывайте.
the whole arrow thing like before. Like we're not pointing to an old object. We're just getting a copy of its data.
Uh-huh. All right.
And regarding the scope, I think the double here is just in the main scope, so it won't have any access to the object itself, right? So you change the number here, you just change the number in this scope.
Oh, like locally?
Yeah, just like
Okay.
locally.
All right,
And
so
not the object.
so even when we come back to the main method and we look at lat gets negative 12.0, that's not going to change the latitude in our lemma.
Right.
I see.
They just have the same name, but like two different axes, I think.
Oh, okay. So in the end, when we print out lemma.lat, it's going to remain whatever we created it in the first place, which was negative 15.5.
Нет, я понимаю, я учу. Вы-то что делаете? Можете объяснить? Так, что там было? Минус 15,5, минус 15,5 выведется. Правильно? Без объяснений. Просто он уже устал объяснять,
As you
потому что
saw when the
правильно.
students were discussing, the key to solving this problem is was minus 15.5. Actually, do it's
Ну,
exactly
я
that.
понял. Давай
Right?
дальше.
So you've now heard a lot about objects, you've heard a lot about memory models, you've heard a lot about scope, you've worked through some concept challenges, and now we have an opportunity to put it all together.
Ни один курс
So,
оттуда не осилил.
buckle in,
Ну как же
get
так?
ready. This is going to be a tricky example, but we're going to get through it together.
Да довольно прискорбно.
So what we're going to do here is take the simple location class that you've talked about a lot with Christine,
Не
and we're
осилил
going
из-за того,
to
что
change it a bit. So remember, the
силы
simple
воли не
location,
хватило,
we
или
want
из-за
to
того, что
encode the
скучно.
latitude and the
Ты слишком
longitude.
умный для
And
того,
so
чтобы
far
курс
we've been
здесь
encoding them
проходить.
as two
Или
instance
просто
variables.
времени
Each
много
of them
занимает,
is
это
a
другой
number
метод
type of
нашел для
primitive type
поиска,
double.
ну, для изучения.
But now we're going to
Расскажи свою
twist things
историю.
up a bit, and we're going to define a new class, a different class called array location. And we're still going to want to record the coordinates of that location, but we're going to try to implement this by recording them in an array. So it's an array that we're called coords, and the kind of information that's stored in that array are still going to be doubles. All right, so let's think about how we might define this class array location and then try to use it in the main method. Okay, so for our class definition, we define the instance variable coords of type array that's going to contain doubles, and then we're going to need to define the constructor. And the constructor, when it receives a parameter that's specifying an array that indicates the coordinates, we're going to say this dot coords equals 0. Okay, so that's going to be the definition of our constructor. And then we might go ahead and
сейчас ты
want
к чему пришел?
to
Ты сейчас
use
программист?
these objects, and so in our
Полноценный?
main method, you can imagine a
Устроился?
situation where we start us off by defining a
Господи.
new array and initializing it to
Можно
5.0 and 0.0.
Секунду. Пусть
If you
она
look on a
рассказывает.
map, you'll see that those are roughly the coordinates of Accra in Africa.
Я
And
просто
so then
с
we
ума
might
сойду
want
от
to
этих
create
уведомлений.
a location and label the variable that's pointing to that object, that array location object, and call it Accra, and say that variable Accra is going to point to a new array location with the coordinates as specified in that previous array. And then we might want to go ahead and get ready to think about a different location. And so we might want to use our coords array and store the value 32.9 in the 0th index and negative 117.2 in that the index 1. And if you recognize those are the coordinates for UC San Diego. And then, just to check that we haven't messed anything up, we might debug our code by printing out the coordinates pointed to by the Accra variable. And so what I'd like to do now is pause, and I want you to, first of all, think through what you think will happen when we do this, and second of all, open up Eclipse, type in this code. Remember that your file name is going to have to be arraylocation.java to match with a class name, and see what happens, and see if you can explain what happens. And when we come back together, we'll work through the memory models and figure out together what happens and why.
Нет, это походу нельзя отключить. Прослушал тёлку. Ну ладно. Не знаю, как отключить. Не подписывайтесь, блин. Слишком громко.
So welcome back. Before we do the big reveal and say what actually happened, let's step through and see if we can predict it. Okay, so stepping through the code means we have to run together through the main method, and we're going to pretend to be the computers running this code. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is we're declaring the variable coords, And so using our memory models, that means that we need to
Я
write
могу, знаешь, как сделать?
the word coords next to a
Микшер
box
громкости.
in the scope of the main method. And
А?
what we want in
А?
that
Я вас
box is
победил.
a reference
Easy.
to a new array that is initialized to the values 5.0
Что можно и по
in
индексу обращаться
index
к элементу
0
массива.
and 0.0 in
Но
index
не
1.
15, а 3 минуты.
So the coords variable is in main's scope, and the array object that we
Я это и
created is
говорил.
in the
Ага,
heap. And
хорош.
so what's
Спасибо.
stored in the box for coords is a reference to the array. Okay. What's important here, what's important to keep in mind, is that an array is not a primitive type, it's an object type. Okay, so far, here's our memory model, and we've gone through one line of code. Now we get to the line of code that we will spend the most time on, and this is when we now declare the variable akra.
Ну, блин, а что
This
поделать?
variable is going to be of type array location, which means that what we want to do
Интересно, это спамеры
is
подписываются или
fill
кто?
in our main scope,
Что
draw a
они делают?
box with a cross,
Зачем?
and what we're going to fill in there is a
Уходите.
reference to an object. But in order to refer to an object needs to be constructed, and that's what that keyword new is doing. It's saying, hey, I want a new object, and the kind of object that I want is the array locations object. And so I have to go to the array location class and see that in the heap I'm going to have an array
Ты задал
location
вопрос.
instance.
Ты же
And
программист из
the
рубрики, да?
instance variables associated with that array location instance, well, they're listed right there in the class definition, and I need a coords variable. And now I'm going to go ahead and follow the constructor to initialize the variables in the instance that I have.
Вычел.
The object that I have of type array
Попробую
location.
удалить,
So in the
перезагрузить,
constructor's
установить.
scope, I
Так,
have
не знаю.
another variable that's called coords, and that's my
Никогда
local
проблем
variable
с
for
ней
the
не было.
constructor method that is the parameter to that constructor method. So the constructor array location has as a parameter a variable that's called coords. And what we do in this constructor, oh, sorry, going back, before we
Да
go ahead and
хорош
see
рофлить.
what's in the
Чел
meat of the
страдает.
constructor, we have to see what the value of that parameter is. So let's think about what's passed into the array location constructor when we were in the main method. When we were in the main method, what we passed into array location is coords. Ah, too many coords. We can take care of it. We know what to do by looking at the
В
main
смысле, с
the memory
принципом, ну
models.
типа да.
The coords that's a parameter to the constructor is the variable in main's scope. And so the red arrow is what needs to be copied into the value of the variable in the constructor's scope. And so now the constructor's scope coords variable also points to the variable, to the array that we had in the heap. All right, so when we call the array location constructor, what we're doing is we're creating a new scope for the constructor. We've got a variable in there that is the parameter to that method, and that variable is initialized to the value that was passed in, which is a reference to the array in the heap. So now we need to remember one more thing when we have a constructor, and that is that we want a variable as well in the constructor's scope called this. And what this does is point to the location in the heap where we've allocated space for the object that we're creating. And remember that when we finish with the constructor, what we'll be returning to
Камера
main
пропала.
is that
Акает.
reference to the object that we've
Какая
just went ahead
камера?
and initialized. Okay, so here's our picture so far, and now let's figure out what's happening when we actually execute the code in the array location constructor and try to initialize the variables in the object that we've created. So the one line of code in that constructor is
На
an
офсайте
assignment.
всегда все
This
работало.
dot coords equals coords. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to assign the value on the right-hand side to the thing on the left-hand side. And so on the right-hand side, we just have coords, but we're in the constructor's scope. So that variable is the circled variable coords that has that red reference. It's pointing to the array in the heap. And what we're doing is we're copying that reference to this dot coords. So remember, when we have a dot, that means that we can find the variable by following the arrows. So we look at where this points to.
Женщина, я больше запутался уже в том, что ты хочешь объяснить. Можно уже вопросы, пожалуйста? Давай я уже на вопрос лучше отвечу. 1070 Ti. Нифига себе, ты крут. Раскулачивать надо. Хватит в игры играть. Иди бабки зарабатывай. Так. Что этот код напечатает? Что он говорит? Внимание, обратите внимание, что это может показаться ошибкой компилятора при доступе. А поскольку метод определен в классе MyClass, это я помню. Что ты мне опять показываешь это? Значит, мы создаем C1, MyClass 1025, C2, MyClass 1031. C1A, C1B. Когда, ну, я не понял. А в чем? А есть какой-то подвох, что ли? Private int, double b, int double. Может, я тупой, но вроде все понятно. Ты помог чуваку. Фига себе. Мир полон добрых людей. Так. Дальше что у нас идет? Какой результат выполнения кода выше? Hint draw memory model. Нарисуй модель памяти. А, hint это подсказка? Намек, совет. А что тут думать-то? 1025, 1031. C2 равняется C1. Окей. Ссылку на C1 проебали. C1A равняется 2. Вывести C2A. 2. Иза. Ты покупал шипчат? Если нет, то походу нельзя убрать оповещение. Не покупал. Да я просто выключил звук, да и все. После Python дорогу в Machine Learning. Так это не Python, это Java. Хотя уже многие версии попробовал. Попробуй это, но он с официального сайта тебе ссылку дал. В коде из вопроса 2 выше, после выполнения C2 равняется C1. Как вы можете вернуть объект C2 в предыдущую точку? Никак. C2 restore C2 минус. Жесть. Никак. Как только здесь выполнился этот код, ты проебался на первый объект. Все. До свидос. До свидос. Посмотрите код ниже. Что будет на выходе из этого кода? 1025, 1031. Инкремент boss C2. Инкремент boss. Это все на 1. Все на 1 умножаются. C2. MyClass C1. То есть плюс 1, плюс 1. То есть здесь будет 11, здесь 32,5. Вывести. C1A, C2A. 10, 11. Все вроде понятно. Garbage. Отдай объект. Если у сайтов ничего не скачивал никогда. Так удали предыдущие перед тем, как будешь устанавливать. И перезагрузись. Вообще там есть тема про фантомные ссылки и призраки. Но значение, конечно, не вытянуть из таких мастодонтов вроде. Эта версия не подходит. Что-то странно. Походу тебе пора переустановить винду. Быстрее будет и правильнее. Хотя странно, с этим никогда проблем не было. Так, чё? Ну, я, может, туплю, но вроде так. То, что удалил все вручную, есть трава? Может быть. And start to submitting work. А, то есть можно еще это. О, шаман. Стань шаманом-королем. Посмотрите на код ниже. Что будет на выходе? Окей. Да что вы все подписываетесь-то, блядь? Кто вы такие? Если что, сообщения с YouTube не идут. Да. А там постоянно у овцы такая проблема. Вы что, издеваетесь, что ли? Новый фолловер, новый фолловер. Здесь, короче, надо сделать вот так. Например, там нижнюю черточку сохранить. Применить. Потом опять нижнюю черточку. Сохранить. Применить. Окей. 7 бет, 1 ресет. В своем случае 7 бет, 7 перестановок винды. Ты покупал шипчерт? Не. А, вот, вижу, да. Да я просто не привык, что кто-то вообще на YouTube заходит. Кому троллит. Я его потроллю. Блин, придется это окно здесь держать теперь. Когда тебе фолловится, идет таймер. 10 минут. Да, я знаю. А я меньше не нашел, как там поставить. Потому что этот задал будут эти спамеры. Они начинают писать какие-то эти. Вливаешься в канал, раскрути, купи раскрутку. Заходить их постоянно банить. Геморно. Посмотрите на код ниже, что вы видите. Ну, создали опять 10.25, 10.35, 10.31.5, инкремент А, инкремент А, сделали, инкремент Б, сделали. А, подожди, инкремент А. Инкремент Б. А вот здесь хороший вопрос. Что мы в Фокс идем, ты готов? Ну, надо всех собрать. Надо собрать всех, определиться. Давайте, как, не знаю, там, когда в пятницу заявку подадим, в понедельник. Чтобы все это бабки подготовили, все написали о том, чтобы нас там ждали. Все такое. Пойдем. Мне, ну вот на что на обучение бабки тратить вообще не жалко. Вот честно. Оно того стоит, я просто знаю. Понимаю. Знаю, понимаю. Это бесплатный курс или платный? Ну, здесь 7 дней бесплатный. Если прикинуться бомжом и попросить, чтобы тебе дали бесплатный доступ, то через 2 недели дают бесплатный доступ. А зачем вебки? Я не знаю, какие вебки. В чем ты? Блин, я вот здесь вот, конечно, хороший вопрос. Здесь идет... Ох уж эти фолловеры, перестаньте. Здесь идет передача инта. А инт, он передается по значению. И вот будет он инкрементиться здесь или не будет? Хороший вопрос. Сказал, вместе соберемся. Вебки подрубим. Не. Я имею в виду, бабки соберем. Деньги соберем. Деньги соберем. И там это. Вместе все обратимся к ним. Чтобы нам и скидку дали. И начнем. Бабки. Бабусики. Чтобы бабки подготовить надо. Может, ну, у меня-то вроде есть. Может, кому-то надо подготовить эту сумму. Как-то. А, там же еще 10 дней халявных. Ну, короче, надо вместе собраться, да и пойти. Но я бы еще этого Димку спросил, как у него там дела с этим делом идут. Он же пошел на 10 дней пробных каких-то. Ну, фолловеры. 151, 150. Подписывается, отписывается. Они же, походу, спамеры заходят, пытаются что-то наспамить, и у них не получается, они это валят в жопу. Круто. Так. Ну а что сиськи мять? Давай попробуем. Там еще 10 дней прямо в описании. Дается 10 дней. Ну, прикольно. CA, C2A, C2B. C2A, C2B. И вот оно инкрементница на 1 или не инкрементница. Я думаю, что... Что? Ну, я думаю, что инкрементница. Ну, вот как в 1С инкрементница. Не знаю, давай. Name your government user ID. Я не знаю, что это значит. Проверяем. 4 из 5. Последний, наверное, неправильный, да? Да. Передается копия значения. Но я вот сомневался, что если типа не справляешься, то идешь нахер. Ну это нет, а мне показалось, что там имеется в виду в 1s инкремент есть. Ага. X равняется x плюс 1. Такой инкремент только. А плюс-плюс нету. Ну, короче, я подозревал, что здесь такой подвох будет. Ну ладно. А мне показалось, что он метод 10 не испытательный. Это не испытательный для него, а испытательный для этих. Ну, короче, ему предлагают, и он выбирает, нравится ему или не нравится. Ну, как триал. 10 минут. Здесь разбор вопросов. Это понятно. Ой, там какое-то сообщение. Около 40... Что здесь? Более 40 сочли эту лекцию полезной и рецензировали ее более одного раза. Вы можете вернуться к этому позже. Не понял. За 7 дней может пройти весь курс? Да вполне. Если прям целиком сядешь, точно пройдешь. Если еще какие-то стартовые знания есть, то точно. Стоп. Сетап Eclipse, это проходим. А вот здесь что-то интересное. То есть можно пройти не платя. Ну, в принципе, да. Но здесь как... Там можно, знаешь, как... Напомните, пожалуйста. Подтвердить свою подпись. Ничего не понял? Ну ладно. Вы можете скачать PDF здесь. Установить IDE. Это поможет вам установить IDE, создать, скопировать файлы, скомпилировать программу под Eclipse, использовать документацию. Вы можете посмотреть видео. А какая самоцель-то? Теперь вы начинаете создать свою собственную интерактивную карту мира. Угу. То есть, вот. Instead. Вместо написания кода ты будешь через финал склеит курс брать. А я хрен его знает, что это такое. Типа, ну да. Да. То есть, ну, это я называю это прикинуться бомжом. Ну да. Ну, по крайней мере, пока что так. И то я отправил заявку с 2 аккаунтов даже. Посмотрим, что там дадут, не дадут. Ну, вообще говорят, всем дают. Ну, видишь, как там получается, ты не можешь запросить на следующий, пока не прошел предыдущий. То есть ты прошел один курс, ждешь какое-то время, посылаешь финансик лаид, вот это вот, потом еще раз пишешь там то, что ты прикинулся бомжом, и все. Можно написать, что я за 1С шутка. Да ладно, чё. Шутка не шутка. Я тебе говорю, я как посмотрел, сколько стоит сдать сертификат. 16 тысяч стоит первый уровень, 16 тысяч стоит второй уровень, это попытка. И 70 тысяч стоит третий уровень. Попытка сдать сертификат. Да мы реально бомжи. 70 тысяч за сертификат, за попытку. Почему я... Ну, ёпта, началось. У нас тут за такие вопросы банят. Почем сертификат? Ну вот, по Java, по Oracle. Да. Не по 1С. По 1С это гораздо дешевле. Пермак. Да, у нас за такие вопросы. Почему Java? Python лучше Java и все такое. Коллектор отмудок код захалявал. Да не. Ну, 3200, например, за вот такие курсы, ну это дорого в месяц. Рублей 500, там, 700, 800, я бы еще понял. Java для профессионалов. Мне для себя интересно. Я ж хз. Потому что это популярно, много платят. И популярно, и много платят. А еще это популярно, и за это много платят. И это еще популярно, а еще за это много платят. И все. Так. На практике вы будете использовать эти библиотеки. Часть установки вы уже скачали. И вам нужно начать использовать эти библиотеки. Да. Now it's your turn to explore library and buy something new. Это вот теперь ваша очередь. Не рассказывать, как он Java освоил. Наверняка было что-то интересное. Да, была великолепно крутая бутылка, видимо. Шучу. Вообще не так с 1С. С 1С столько не платят. Я так и не понял, это популярно или же много платят. Это очень важно. Нет, я понял. Open new project in Eclipse. Ну, у нас IntelliJ, окей. Open Hello World Java. Open Hello World Java, окей. Ты текст для заявки с туториал копировал или копировал? Да я не знаю Java. Он же котлинист. Баянист. Котлинист, баянист. Весь стартовый код для всех программ. Ой, а можно вот так? Я пока одеваюсь. Весь стартовый код для всех знаний по программированию в этом курсе представляется загруженным инструментным проектом. В окне Package Explorer слева, когда вы распознаете папку, вы увидите несколько пакетов внизу, разверните пакет модуля, увидите Hello World Java. Easy. Крутой англичанин, правда? Откройте этот файл по двойному клику. О, господи, серьезно? Ты раньше 5К получал? Нет. Если бы я раньше 5К получал, я не стал уходить на 5К. Зачем? Когда вы откроете этот Hello World, да, рублей, то однажды. Обычно меньше. Сука. Тролли. Вы можете увидеть несколько предупреждений. Типа the server class declare static final serial version. У меня нет такой ошибки. А почему камбэк? Потому что полгода назад или год назад я уже начинал учить Java и что-то из-за Нового года забил. Рублей там много, я заведу работу. Я себе. Тебя даже кормит, блядь. Запустим код в приложении. Окей, можно, да, я перейду дальше, блядь. Если вы открыли, у вас 30 секунд или больше, это нормально. Да-да, во-ла-ла, about 5 stars, Сан-Диего. Понятно. Меня не кормят, я из столовой двору. Закупим маки, блядь. Сука, дикари. Добавьте код в файл, чтобы ваш апплет выполнял следующие действия. Смотри ниже, советы для получения справки, если вам это нужно. Опа. display a second map next to the default one. The map should be zoomed into your hometown by default. See hints below for how to find your hometown. Latitude, longitude. Отобразите вторую рядом карту рядом с картой по умолчанию. Должна быть увеличена до вашего родного города. Смотри ниже, как указать широту, долготу вашего родного города. Охренеть. Часто стримишь? Ну вот, второй вечер. Ну и так сейчас по вечерам буду стримить. Смотри, тетки зажмут. И будешь подстольный квест исполнять, блять. Ебать вы жесткие. Так. А мы можем выполнить здесь что-то? Здесь, наверное, нечего выполнять, да? Точки входа, наверное, нету. Но здесь где-то, может быть, есть какие-то эти подсказки. Анджела не зашла. Да, зашла. Чисто в очко я и куда-то там дальше вышла. Помойка это. Паплет. Принт. Я просто забыл, чем мы в прошлый раз делали-то. А мы это делали где-то здесь, по-моему, да? А, main. Метод main там используется. Но main же. Ну, блин, сорян, я еще туплю. Ой, я вообще даже не то нажал. То есть я из этой стартовой точки вызываю стартовую точку, получается, в p-applet. Окей. И называю метод, который я выполняю. Здесь это hello world, правильно? И пробуем это запустить. Чтобы получить седьмую версию к ужину, нужно указывать карту. Там автооплата, то есть через 7 дней деньги снимутся. Но я на самом деле использую, в принципе, в таких случаях виртуальные карты какие-нибудь. Потому что может там автооплата, может там где-то какими-то звездочками все это будет написано. Поэтому лучше сделать виртуальную. Ну, в Сбербанке бесплатные виртуальные карты делаются. Какой-нибудь там указать, там, ну, списываться с нее ничего не будет. Можешь, не знаю, любой рандомный найти. Так, почему оно не заработало? Здесь заработало, тут не заработало. Пойдет. Там без разницы какую. Так, Алекс, я вызываю тебя. Шучу. Клауд залагала. Ну-ну. Hello world. Ну. Я же не должен через этот. Типа так. Это же так не работает. Я так думаю. Блять, работает, что ли? Нихуя себе. А что так много это ошибок-то? Что он там сказал? Warning using illegal? Не понял. Пох на ошибки он работает. Да, как раз таки ни хрена не работает. Вот тут работает, а тут нет. Модуле 1. Точка. Run. Библиотеки подрублены, но я вроде в прошлый раз подругал. Ну, давай проверим. Project. Libraries. Здесь все включено. Здесь все... А, тут что-то выключено. Все равно какие-то ошибки сыпятся. Окей. Или не окей. Попробуем что-нибудь прочитать из этого всего. Сервер вернул Бибу. А тут реально Биба. Подожди, а здесь она будет работать? А оно и здесь не работает. Хотя вчера работало. Та-да-да-да. А что за фигня? Все? Забанили, что ли? И как работать с этим делом? Что-то прям как с погодой. Ой, господи. Да какой интернет-эксплорер? Иди отсюда. Третий раз я не ошибусь. Красивее будут. Господи, меня сейчас некрасивый коммент интересует. Меня интересует, почему оно не работает. Прям реально проблема. Нет, сейчас хочу подсказки. Буду смотреть подсказки, честное слово. Ну, запустить. Ctrl-Shift плюс такое нажать нужно. Да. У меня на телефоне есть смайлики. Я теперь хоть знаю, что за смайлики ты там шлешь. Кривые пальцы, котлиниста. И что делать? Оно не работает. Оно не работает не из-за того, что я виноват, а из-за того, что оно реально не работает. But your computer or network. Ваш компьютер или сеть могут установить автоматический запрос, чтобы защитить наших пользователей. Мы не можем работать вопрос прямо сейчас. Прикольно. Да это я знаю, там этот крутит-вертит вот только так. За спам жахнули. Походу, да. И как мне с этим дальше жить? Спасибо, Google. Вот так я и перестал изучать его. Эх, это Google. То Google, то Яндекс. Ну, короче, блин, или на какой сервис там с погодой встречался? Да я не на какой там не погода. Там этот... Карта. А, с погодой, да, это раньше было, что-то точно. Стучались мне на какой-то сервак с погодой. Тоже там банили. Банили. Блять, и что делать? Про старый проект. Да, помню. А можно в оффлайне работать, смотри. Ну-ка, а так оно заработает? А у него даты нет. Ну, типа это. Биба. School error. А процесс не может получить доступ к файлу, так как тот занят другим процессом. Давай перезапустим. Судьба тебе прям намекает 2 раза уже. Что иди, блядь, и купи курс у нормальных людей и им занимайся. Но мне же надо в любом случае английский поднимать. Хотя я так-то не особо. ОБС уже запущен. Пардон. Что не так? Да и защита от DOS-атаки на Гугле сработала, а мне оттуда карты надо вытаскивать. Сейчас посадят за DDoS. Google задудосил. Ну да. Парстер сделать, так доступ к сайту на сутки закрыли. Ну, походу, здесь тоже что-то будет на несколько часов. Он сейчас открываться не хочет. Я просто так взять и сделать парсер. Походу, да. Что делать? Ну, попробуем вслепую выполнить это задание. Здесь в чем задача? Мне нужно сделать так, чтобы здесь появилось второе окошко.
Congratulations on getting Java, Eclipse, and Unfolding Maps set up on. Let's dive into module. This means that this is going to be a graphical user interface. And it has two methods that we're going to care about. So if you scroll down, you're going to find the setup.
Там в видосе есть
Setup
про
is
что
called
делать
once, and it sets up
с
everything
мапом.
within the frame. And then the other method that we're going to focus on is draw. Now draw is called repeatedly. So now that we have an overview of the structure, that there's a setup and a draw method, let's try running the application and see what it looks like. So go under here
Я
to
хоть посмотрю, как это
run
выглядит.
as Java applet. And what we get is an application that has a background with a map on it, and this map is zoomed into California. It already has some built-in functionality in that you can zoom in or zoom out if you wish. And what's missing from this right now is a second map, which should go here, which is going to be your zoomed into your hometown. So that's the main thing you have to do with this assignment, is create the second map that's zoomed into your hometown. And what we'll do is we'll start looking at the code that might help you accomplish this. So the main thing to focus on is where was that first map created. So if you go into your code, what you'll find are we have two maps that are created, map 1 and map 2. And before I dive into the details of those, I do want to mention if you are working offline, you'll want to change this variable to be true. Alright, back to our maps. So we have two maps, an unfolding map 1 and an unfolding map 2. And what we've set up is map 1 for you, but we haven't set map 2 yet. We create the application just as we do here, which is using the size method, which creates an 800 by 600 size map. And then we set the background. If you want to change the background color, you can play with that here. And then we use our map provider, which here we are using Google. We have some code which only applies if you're offline. And then you can find down here finally our first use of map 1. Here we're creating a new unfolding map. Here's our X, our Y, our width, and our size. And we're using this Google Map Provider to create this unfolding map. Now you'll want to use something just like this for your solution. And notice that then, right after we create the map, we then zoom and pan to a location. And this location happens to be the location of UCSD, but you'll want to put in the location of your hometown here. The next step is to see if map 1 is used anywhere else. And it turns out map 1 is shown in the draw method. So as long as you do the draw method in, if you call map1.draw within the draw method, map 1 draws.
Они даже туда
do something
выводят.
similar with map 2. So I hope at this point you have a pretty good feel of what you're going
1С,
to do.
да.
So you're going to focus
Гениально.
on setting up a map 2 at the right location in the application, and then you're going to zoom into your hometown, and then you're going to make sure that map 2 is drawing every time this draw method gets called. After completing your assignment, your next step will be to just take the programming assignment quiz at the end of this module. So you will not be sending any code for any of the assignments within this course. Instead, you'll be taking the end of module quizzes, which will test you on the concepts both in the module but also on ideas related to the programming assignment. So before you take the end of week required quizzes, make sure you do the programming assignments first. Alright, good luck on this assignment. I hope you have
Ну что, получается, здесь надо просто это КЦКВ после туду. Туду. Туду, 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 туду. Туду, 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 туду. Ну попробуем хотя бы так это, чтоб запустилось. Когда уже обновленный HTC выйдет, хочу 9 ведро. А гид-репозиторий у тебя есть? Нет, откуда? Я же дебил. Пока что еще. В1, В2, В3, В4. Ядрить, колотить. А есть варианты попроще? Это, я как понимаю, координаты. Но они в каком-то странном виде. Потому что если здесь обычно я поставлю координаты, название переменных просто класс, то здесь координаты будут выглядеть вот так. Почему там с какими-то буквами H? Что, меня вообще в гугле забанили, что ли, на картах? Походу, да. За шо, ребят? Да за что, за шо? Походу это. GG. Какая у меня классная планета, блядь. Не, ну есть, конечно, вариант. Та-дам! Хотел землю спортить, не зашло. Ну да. Ну ладно, так пойдет. Для Яндекс.Карт напиши. И там забанят. Ну, предположим, вот так будет. Чпунь. Чпунь. И как мне вот это привести вот в это? Как это вообще выглядит? Точки. Здесь вот минус есть. Ага. То есть верхняя часть это минус, нижняя часть это плюс. Так напишу. Да, я понял, что вроде это. Вроде так и есть. Map to. Вот так. И это вот так. F это типа float тип. Точно, там есть такая фишка. Тогда F-чики мы оставим. Окей. У тебя такие координаты есть? Ну, примерно. Я же не буду вам квартиру свою показывать. Так. Ну, естественно, оно сейчас не запустится. Или запустится. Сработает это дело на хосты? Ну, скорее всего, нет. Если... А еще есть стиль. Да мне, походу, надо теперь это, блин. Боишься? Да нет, просто зачем? Предупрежден, значит вооружен. Ну, короче, ладно, координаты я воткнул. В принципе, как я понимаю, это работать будет. Мне только единственное, что нужно сдвинуть куда-то вот это. То есть это, я как понимаю, место, где карта будет. Можно VPN тебе подрубить. Да, можно на комп его подрубить. Но если я его сейчас включу, ну, и скачаю и включу, то упадет стрим. Короче, пойдем сейчас с 500. Здесь пойдем с 700. Здесь пойдем с 900. Не знаю. Вылезет оно сейчас, не вылезет. Ой, 7000 написал. Сейчас, походу, это забажилось бы там что-нибудь. Не знаю. Попробуем так. Как раз банит, проверим. Какое там еще есть задание? Воткните свои координаты. И все. Полный лист провайдеров карт. А можно к другому провайдеру реально подрубиться. А Яндекса здесь нет. А кто еще есть? Что там было? Где там? А где у меня провайдер? Провайдер где-то здесь должен быть написан, да? Hello World Setup. Провайдер Google. New Google Terrain провайдер. Если я сейчас другой воткну, пойду спать. Напиши, как надумаете. Надумаете к лисам идти. Ну так это, собирайтесь. Как соберетесь, я готов. И тут есть еще ERC провайдер. Есть у меня такой? ERC провайдер. Ой, ядрить, колотить. К новой клавиатуре еще не привык. Abstract might. А он что, какой тип возвращает? Is abstract can be initialized. А что здесь я должен выбрать? World Map. Попробуй Street Map, если есть. Была такая. Сейчас посмотрю. Подожди, посмотрю, как она выглядит. Street. World Street Map. Open Street Map есть. Наверное, она. Import class. Типа так попробуем. А ну что он ругается? О, здесь надо еще какой-то другой метод, видимо, вызывать. А мы сейчас вот так посмотрим. Что там в гугле вызывалось? В гугле вызывалось Google Terrain Provider. Последнее. Вот это что ли надо? Я просто хрен знаю, что такое. Open Street Map Provider. Generic Street Map Provider. Cloud Street Map Provider. Open Street Map Provider. Так, запустишься. Я их вообще первый раз вижу. Что, меня и тут забанили, да? OpenStreetMap Provider. Давай попробуем. Но походу не работает оно тоже. Не знаю почему. Ругается и все. Хотя вот здесь долгопрудный, вон что-то показал. Даже. Значит, может быть проблема в чем-то другом уже. Сервер вернул 403. Хотя здесь нифига не 403. Это из офлайн. Но у меня же не офлайн. Офлайн false. Я тогда ничего не понимаю, почему это не работает. Оно редиректит их на HTTPS и не обрабатывает. Блять. HTTPS, ну да. Кого теперь еще можно посмотреть? Mapbox. Вроде как звучит ничего. Mapbox провайдер. Давай вот так вот воткнем. Попробуем. Сидишь, блядь, провайдер подбираешь. А что не так-то? Mapbox. Mapbox провайдер. Что не так? Не то, значит. Plain USA. Что-то здесь не вижу ничего вообще нормального. Попробуем первую. Blank провайдер. Stop and return. Что-то неправильно. Тоже что-то не хочет обрабатывать. File not found. Прикольно. Еще варианты. Еху. Ну, еху-то должно отработать. Все сломалось. Да. Реал, гибрид, род. Ну, род провайдер, окей. Я не знаю, оно не работает. Почему оно не работает, понять не могу. DNS неправильно. Фигня какая-то. Жил-был Google, и тот сдох. Microsoft. Ну да, попробуем Microsoft. Microsoft Road провайдер. Уже какой-то великий рандом. Не взлетит, сейчас пометишь, что выполнено. Завтра... О, Microsoft взлетел. Да ладно. 50-50 здесь надо ставить. Здесь оставляем 500, а здесь оставляем 50. Здесь оставляем 350. Здесь оставляем 500. И все, good. Неужели взлетело? Ну да, вот, пожалуйста, Клинский район. Вот, пожалуйста, та фигня. Мне бы ширину еще его побольше сделать. Да, сделаем здесь просто поуже. 400. Хотя даже 400 по идее не влезет. 400 это не то, 400 это длина. Прикольная штука, блин. И не 500, наверное, надо, а 400. Вот здесь вот. Тогда можно ставить 350. 350. Блять, чуть-чуть слиплось. 410. 420. Microsoft всегда выручает. Да вообще норм, пацаны. Ну вот, все красиво. Более-менее. И... Блин. Прикольно. Мне нравится. Changing Map Provider. Даже мы даже Changing Map Provider сделали. Блин, как классно то, что в Яве все на библиотеках. Господи. А, здесь даже написано, вы будете забанены на 24 часа. Особенно, когда после установки винды Chrome нужно скачать. Да. Go next. 7 вопросов. А что такое attempts? Попытки. 3 попытки каждые 8 часов. То есть нельзя еще это обузить. Стартуем. Пошли решать. Chrome, кстати, не очень в последнее время. А что ты используешь? Какая Y-координата отвечает за пиксель? Нижний левый угол карты, создаваемый в коде не выше. Нижний левый угол. Что-то я не понял, что является нижним левым углом. 50 это отступ слева. Второй 50 это отступ сверху. 350 это ширина. Ширина. Да, 500 получается. 500. Нижний левый угол. Первый. Подожди, первый. Второй. Третий. Четвертый. Блин, или 350, или 500. Если смотреть купленное кино на ютубе, то лагает, приходится его в F смотреть. Лагает это защита копирования. Грузит сброд, что пипец. Какая из этих линий кода создает две карты одинаковой высоты? Как и другая. Друг на друге в окне. Какая следующая инструкция создает две карты одинаковой высоты рядом с друг другом в другом окне рядом с друг другом? Именно рядом друг с другом. 50, 50, 200, 300. 50, 50. Ну, вот это получается. Ну, у меня так примерно. Только здесь не 250, у меня 400. Но так как первые значения одинаковые. Друг за другом 50, 50. Да, вот это все правильно. Assume это что? Предполагать. Предположим, вы имеете следующий такой же код, создающий две карты, которые поддерживают вывод друг за другом в окне выбора. Ваш код компилируется и запускается, но только одна карта показывается в видимой позиции. Когда вы запускаете, что вам необходимо исправить? Выберите все возможные варианты. Это. Forgetting to call zoom and plan on. Нет, вот это нет. Ладно, пойду спать. И есть еще не решил. Давай, спасибо за помощь. Какие из следующих широт и долгот и широт используете в методе Рио-де-Жанейро, Бразилия? Блять, вот это вот что за издевательство? Вот прям не хочется решать, а приходится. Я в гугле сижу из-за вас по этому. По какому-то нехорошему делу. Рио-де-Жанейро, Бразилия. Рио-де-Жанейро. Вот, пожалуйста. Первый. Угадал. Что наиболее сложное? Что было самой сложной частью этого задания? Ничего. За то, что попробовать быть забаненным в Гугле. Как много вы потратили программирование в этом задании программирование часов? Inside only your time. Ну, 1 час, наверное, да, потратили? How long did you spend? Так, еще раз. Less than 1 hour. Understand, submit. А чё я неправильно ответил-то? 500 это высота. А что правильно было, получается? 350? Я вот это, конечно, не понял. Что такое координата, которая соответствует пикселю в левом нижнем углу карты, который создается строкой кода выше? Нижний левый угол 350. Получается, нет? Нет, 500. А, 50-50 верхней левой точка, 350-500 нижней правой точка. Я понял, 350, правильно. Накосячил, ну да. Накосячил. А 550 коррект. 550 это координата нижнего левого угла. Ну да. Еще раз накосячил, еще раз я затупил. Хорош. Ну тогда это ГГ. Согласен. Ну тут такой вопрос, как бы. Не кода. И что у нас, Week 3 началось? Да. Че, мы тусим еще? Тусим или не тусим? Да, потусим. Посмотрим, что будет.
Let's continue on to this next module on graphical user interfaces. We'll really dive into the project and start building.
Охренеть. К концу этой недели вы будете уметь создавать и манипулировать графическим интерфейсом, уметь эффективно использовать Java-документацию, использовать Processing Library, какие-то библиотеки в ваших программах, настраивать визуально карты, используя Java-код, использовать Java для того, чтобы читать файлы с данными, как-то organize data, располагать данные внутри каких-то объектов, организовать данные в соответствующие объекты, в соответствующие. Describe and use. Describe. Разбирать. Описывать, использовать. List, array list. Map data type. Угу. И слайды, которые могут вам помочь. Открываем слайды. Week 2. Здесь будут красивые картинки, походу. Ядрить, колотить. Ядрить, колотить. Ну что ты там? Какие-то страшные колбы, наверное, сейчас опять высылаешь. Меня потом забанят. А когда видишь, отжимается. Это надо посмотреть. Это я не могу. Открыть оригинал. Ага. Оно того стоит.
Я отжимаюсь 1500 раз за где-то 3,5 часа.
Раз, два, 4, 1495, 96.
Я отжимаюсь 1500 раз за где-то 3,5 часа.
Раз.
Господи, ты видел, ты бы видел, как его Соболев разгонял? Бля, это жесть. Там такой конфликт. Сюк, лучше даже не встревать. Так, это нам не надо, это нам не надо, это нам не надо, это нам не надо. Это нам надо. Mark is complete. Go next item. Okay.
In the programming assignment for Module 3, we'll be overlaying information about events onto a world map. For our assignment, we've chosen earthquake data, but you could use the same principles to map outbreaks of disease, social network activity, internet connectivity, and really much more. There are three major components to this assignment. The first is creating marks on the world for recent earthquakes. The second is to customize those marks on the map based on the magnitude of the earthquake. And the last step is to create the legend over here on the left to help someone understand the markers on the map. Some of these steps may seem daunting right now, but we'll provide you code and support to help you succeed. Along these lines, the next videos will teach you how to create graphical user interfaces, or sometimes called GUIs, in Java. We'll work through some examples with unfolding maps and the processing libraries as well. Now, if you're already familiar with designing GUIs and these libraries, feel free to skip ahead to the project walkthrough video so that you can get up and running with the project. We hope you have fun.
Ага. Веселье прям впереди. Можно видосики позалипать, чтобы завтра на них время не тратить.
Think back to the programs that you've written up until now. And if you think back to them, especially if you've had to start from scratch, their functionality may have been a little bit limited. Maybe you're interacting with files, text files, or command lines. Maybe you're letting your user type in a couple of things in order to determine what the program does or ask questions to the program. But what we'd like to do in this project and then in this course and specialization as a whole is ramp you right up to medium and big and large scale programs to get you really experiencing what it's like to develop code in the real world. And so by the end of this video, you'll be able to create one kind of pretty sophisticated application, a GUI. And in order to do that, you'll be reading and using other people's code and libraries. And in particular, you'll be using the processing library. So I want to step back and think about what we'll be doing, and then we'll talk about how to do it. So by the end of this video, you will have the tools to create a really cool application where, for this particular example, we have in the background an image of one of my favorite beaches here in San Diego, La Jolla Shores Beach. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a second sun. It's sunny enough in San Diego, but we're going to add a second one. And that second sun is going to be like a visual clock for us. And so what we're going to do is have the color of the second sun that we've drawn on change depending on the actual time of day around us. And so, for example, at noon, we want it to be a bright yellow sun. And then as the day gets closer to sunset, the color maybe will get pinky red, and then at dusk will go to gray, and at nighttime it will black out. And then at sunrise again, we're going to have the sunshine. So that's what you'll be able to do by the end. And this is really an example of a GUI, which is a funny way of saying graphical user interface. It's an acronym. And when you think about graphical user interfaces, maybe that's sounds a little bit complicated, but you can't use a computer these days without interacting with a graphical user interface. They're really the programs that we work with all around us, from maps to development environments like Eclipse to browsers. Everything around us has elements like menus or icons or response to mouse clicks, has text boxes. All of these elements that we can draw on the screen, display data to the user, invite the user to interact with the program by manipulating something on the screen, those are all graphical user interfaces. So the application that we're working on is a particular graphical user interface example, and it's one that's displaying information. In a couple of modules, you'll also be able to incorporate interactivity and have your graphical interface respond to user input. That's coming soon. But for now, let's think about how we might go about coding some graphical user interfaces. And we don't want to start from scratch. What we'd like to do is think about what other people have done before us, stand on the shoulder of giants, as people say, and there's all sorts of libraries available to do GUIs in Java. So you might have heard some of these names as you're Googling around seeing how to program in Java, and everyone's got their favorites. Some are older, some are newer. In this course, we're going to be using the processing library. But something I want you to keep in mind throughout this whole process
Это настолько увлекательно,
that
что хочется
it
поиграть во
doesn't
что-нибудь.
really matter which library you end up choosing. There are odds and quirks about each one of them. There's little tricks to do with how you might choose one rather than the other. But at the end of the day, the design of the GUI is a high-level process, and it's a really important process because it will determine a lot of the usability and the user experience of people who are customers to your application. So it's really crucial, not the focus of this course, but when it comes down to implementing a design, you can use all sorts of different libraries and they'll all provide the similar functionality. And the way that they'll provide that functionality is through documentation. And so what we'll be talking about in the rest of the videos that come is how to use that documentation in order to create this really cool application.
Это живая технология? Скорее нет.
So welcome back to this second of a sequence of videos in which we're going to be building a graphical application. And remember, our goal is to display this beautiful beach picture and add a second sun, and that sun is going to be a visual clock for us. So if we deconstruct the application and what we need to do, basically we need to create some window or canvas and then place items onto that canvas. And so we're going to have a background image, and then we're going to put some shapes onto the image. And so we'd like a way for our canvas to be able to display images and shapes, and for us to be able to control the location and color and various other properties as well. All right, so let's think about how we would do that, and we'll start by thinking about controlling the position of elements in our application. So a really convenient way of specifying position is using coordinates. You've probably thought about them a lot in various math backgrounds and other situations, maps, for example. And what we can do is we can separate our canvas, the window that we're working with, into a grid. And we've got points on this grid being determined by their location across in the X direction and up and down in the Y direction. And so the X direction determines how far across the picture we are, and the Y coordinate determines how far down the picture we are. And so it's useful to keep in mind how each of these variables changes as we walk across the picture. And so the 0 of the x coordinate, where x is smallest, is on the left-hand side. And as we go towards the right, the x value increases. And that's just as you would expect from other contexts of coordinates. But y is a little different. Y is a little tricky. It starts at 0 at the very top, not at the bottom. At the very top is where y is equal to 0. And then as we move down the picture is how it grows. All right, so let's practice. Let's take an example. And suppose we had a canvas and it was 200 pixels wide and 200 pixels long. Let's think about what the coordinates would be of the center of the yellow sun in this picture. Okay, so let's think about it. And when you're ballparking these coordinates, what you might want to do is think about relative position. So is the sun halfway across the picture? No, it's not really. Is it a quarter of the way across the picture? Yeah, it kind of looks like it's a quarter of the way. And so the center x coordinate would be probably around 50. And ditto for the y coordinate, it's probably a quarter of the way down as well. And these are just rough numbers, so it's not exactly those, but pretty good. Okay, so we know how to place, how to at least determine positions on the canvas. But now what we'd like to do is translate this into actual Java code and not just talk about, abstract
Что
drawing a
происходит?
grid
Зрители
on the
то 3,
canvas,
то
but
7.
actually coding it up. And so we're going to use
Что вы
processing.
делаете?
And processing is this amazing,
Спите.
versatile library of classes and methods and data types that we can use in order to develop our applications. The thing is, though, you would not want to memorize everything that's in processing. What you want to do is have some sort of an index or a way of looking things up. I really want to do something with the size. I'm going to look in my processing index to see if there's a method to do with the size of the canvas. And the Java documentation of processing gives us exactly that. So we look up in processing and we see that there's a class called papplet. And what this class does is it does all of the hard work under the hood of bringing up a canvas, a little window, and then giving us functionality for drawing in that window. So when we want to go ahead and define our application, the one with La Jolla Shores in the background and the sun, we don't need to worry about what it means to draw a canvas on my computer screen. I can leave that to the papplet data type, which is a kind of a GUI data type, and then just customize what's being displayed in that window that's being brought up by my papplet. So if we look at this code snippet, what we see here is that our class, the class that we're defining, my papplet, extends papplet. So extends is a really important keyword, and Leo is going to tell you all about that in next module about inheritance. But you don't need to worry about that just yet. We're going to use this notion and then learn about it after you got some experience with how powerful it is. For now, think about extends papplet as a way of telling Java that we would like to use the core functionality that's available in papplet, but then customize it a little bit. So the people who wrote processing developed the data type papplet. They developed it with graphical applications in mind, so it gives us a kind of GUI. And what we're going to do now with my papplet is customize it and change it up a little bit. But in order to use it, we have to tell Java, the thing that I'm extending, well, it comes from the processing library. And so in the beginning of our code there, we have to tell Java, please look at the code that's available in processing.core, and we're going to access some of those data types. So that's what that line up there is doing. But now when we want to build our papplet, what we have to do, our job is to specify two methods. So what we are going to need to tell Java is, first of all, how to configure the canvas, and that's going to be in the setup method. And then, once we've configured the canvas, what to actually draw in there, and that's going to be in the draw method. And so if you think about the flow of execution of our application, what's going to happen is that Java will execute the setup method once. As we run our application, the first thing that happens that we define is the setup method. And then that's executed once, and then that code is never touched again. And then every time the canvas is refreshed or redrawn, for example, if it gets resized in the screen, then the draw method will get executed again and again and again. So that piece of code gets executed often. We loop through it a lot. So let's think about what actually happens when we start developing this code. And to do that, let's do baby steps. And this is a useful thing when you're testing your code as well or debugging, is to run it very often. And you'll see, especially when you're debugging graphical applications, you'll want to stop developing code and hit that run button in Eclipse extremely frequently, because it's going to be really the best way of making sure that what you think you're implementing is actually what's showing up on the screen, and you'll be able to catch bugs much more quickly. So you want to hit that run button very, very often. Okay, so if we do that even before we put any methods in our class at all, let's think about what will happen. And here I did it in Eclipse offline, and I'm giving you a little screenshot of it. And what you'll see is that we didn't get an error. The code compiled, and it did something even though we didn't define any methods. And that's because we're using the power of papplet. So papplet as a data type already tells Java, hey, I want to draw some default canvas, and then I'm just going to wait. I'm going to do nothing unless the person who's extending this class tells me what to do. Okay, so by default, the applet just displays a blank canvas. But we want to do more than that. We want to draw our picture. And so we're going to now work on bringing in some content to both the setup method and the draw method. Now, what content? Well, that content is going to be determined by the methods available to us in the processing library. And so it's really useful as you're developing to have a browser open with a documentation open available to you, and keep going back and forth between Eclipse and your browser, Eclipse and your browser as you're developing. Don't memorize these methods. Libraries change over time, which one is most modern. That will always change, but all the libraries that are most useful have really good documented code, and so you'll be able to understand which methods are available to you. Okay, so let's think about the setup method, and the pieces that we want to do at the very beginning are to set some default size to our canvas and then get access to the background beach picture that's going to be the background of our application. Okay, so we look up in the index for processing the documentation, and oh, woohoo, we have a size method. And that documentation even gives us an example. It's sweet, great. And we realize that if we type in size open bracket 200, 200, then what that setup method is going to do when it executes this line of code is display our canvas at the default size 200 wide and 200 long or high. All right, cool, we've done that. And now what we'd like to do is have access to the background image. And again, look up in the documentation and see that there's a really nice way of loading an image. And we can even load an image from a URL. So an image might exist as a JPEG file, for example, on your local machine, or it might be on a server somewhere. And with processing, we have a way of going to a specified web address, a URL, and grabbing an image there and bringing that into our application. And so in the documentation, we have an example of how to do that. We stick it in our code, and now we've defined our setup method. What's going to happen when we run? So pause. What do you think? I hope that you ran this example in Eclipse and saw what happened. And what happens might be a little counterintuitive. We still get a blank canvas. Well, that's the reason that happens is because we've only loaded the image into memory. We haven't displayed it yet. And so it's really useful when you're using methods from a library to read through the description. And if we had read through, then we would have seen that what happens when we execute load image is that we have that image loaded into memory, and it's stored in a pimage object, and then we'll have access to it later. But nothing in that documentation talks about displaying that image on the canvas. We'll have to do that later. And so in the next video, we're going to really implement the draw method of our papplet, and once we do that, we'll have our full working application.
Давайте разберемся. Мы посмотрели x, y координат. Предположим, у вас есть окно 400 на 600 пикселей. Какая координата x и y верхнего правого угла of that window? Верхний правый 400. Угу. 27 секунд. Вот такие видео мне нравятся.
So one thing I had a lot of trouble with is GUI and event handling. I remember when I learned it, there was just so many different things that you have to keep track of when you use these things, and it just didn't make any sense to me. So what I did is I took example code and I made edits until it compiled and ran, and I kept running it and making modifications until it ran the way I thought it should.
Ага. Я понял.
Alright, welcome back to our sequence of videos where we're building an application that's going to indicate the hour of the day based on the color of the sun that we've added to the picture.
Я только не понял, мне повторять за ней что-то надо или нет.
Figured out how to use a p-applet class from the processing library, and we've set up our canvas using the setup method. And so now what we'd like to do is fill in the draw method, which is going to let us display the content. Okay, so what we'd like to do is display the background image that we've brought into memory. And so we can do that by using the image method. Okay, so let's do just that. We say image and then background image 0, 0. And what does that do? Well, it seems to us like it's going to have something to do with background image, but the 0, 0 at the end of that are the coordinates that we want for the position of the top left corner of the image. So in this method, what we're doing is we're saying we would like to draw a particular image, and we'd like that image to be located in our canvas so that its top left corner is at 0, 0, and 0, 0 is the top left corner of the canvas. And so that means that we're going to want to have our canvas be at the very top and very left. Okay. So let's see what happens if we do that. Is that what you expected? Remember, that image that we want is all of the beach. And we're getting a bunch of blue, but it's familiar blue. That blue is a sky blue, and that's why the reason for that is that we're actually getting just a tiny piece of the sky. The image is way, way, way too big. Our canvas is just 200 pixels by 200 pixels, and our image was, well, it's a high-def image we took with a modern camera, so it's much more than that, right? If you think about resolutions of images these days. And so what we need to do in order to display the whole image is to resize it. So what we're going to need to do is to figure out how to take a really big image and cram it into the canvas that we're working with. And so we look up our handy documentation. There's a theme here, right? Keep looking at the documentation. And we see that we have a resize method that we can call, and we can specify the width and the height that we would like our image to be compressed to. Okay, so let's try and say maybe we want to have our image just go 50 pixels across, so it's only going to go a quarter of the way across our canvas, which was 200 by 200, and it's going to go half the way down, so it's going to be 100 pixels long. And so we resize our image in memory, and then we go ahead and display it, and okay, so it went a quarter of the way across and halfway down, so that did it. But notice how warped the picture looks, because the ratio of width to height is totally off. It's totally not what the original image looked like. And so we see the trees look like they're reaching like skyscrapers or something in this image, and it's not really giving us the kind of image that we'd like to do. And so what we'd like to do is be a little bit maybe more careful. Maybe we want to use up the whole canvas, and so we could say let's use all 200 pixels across and all 200 pixels down. And so now we see the full image, and we see it a little bit bigger, but it's still not the right proportions. The trees are still way too big. It doesn't look like the original image that we had. And so maybe we do something a little bit tricky. Okay, and so what we've done here is tricky in two ways. So let's start with the 0 that we've got there. And the 0 that we've got is the first parameter of the resize method, says I don't want to specify width. I want to be lazy. And the reason I want to be lazy is that I want the proportions of my picture to match the original. And so I only want to specify one of the coordinates, just the y, just the height coordinate. I want my picture to be the full height of the canvas, and then Java, you calculate the right width. You calculate the right width so that the aspect ratio, the ratio between the width and the height, is maintained to be the same as the original image. Okay, so if we put a 0 in one of the parameters, that means that we don't want to calculate both of the parameters. Java's going to do it for us so that the original proportions are maintained. The second tricky thing that we've done is instead of writing an actual number in the second parameter, we've written the word height. And the advantage of doing that is that height is an instance variable in the papplet class, which tells us the height of the canvas. It tells us how many pixels high the current canvas is. And if you think about taking our canvas and dragging it so it's bigger or smaller, the height of the canvas is going to change. And this height variable will change right along with it. So what this does is, when we say that the background image will have the size so that its height is the height of the canvas, it means that our image will change right along with the canvas as the user plays around with the size of the canvas. So we've made our picture dynamic. We've put our background image that we wanted in the right proportions in the background, but we're still missing the sun. So in the next video, we'll wrap things up by putting the sun in.
Рассуждая о старте предыдущего видео, когда мы используем метод resize, снова, why we need to resize canvas to be as big our large beach image. Блять, господи. Так. Для начала, почему снова пришлось использовать метод изменить размер? Нам нужно было изменить наше изображение, чтобы оно... Нам нужно изменить размер нашего полотна, чтобы оно стало таким же большим, как изображение большого пляжа. Нет? Нам нужно изменить размер изображения пляжа, чтобы оно было меньше и вписывалось в наш 200 на 200 холст. We need to resize the image of the beach to be smaller and fit our... Submit. Continue. Интересно сделано то, что ты не можешь это нажать далее, далее, далее и получить сертификат.
We are almost done. So remember what we've done up until now. We are working towards building an application that has a background image of the beach and then has a visual clock that's represented by a second sun. And at this point, we've defined the setup method of our class myPapplet that customizes the papplet class provided by processing. And then we've started working on the draw method, and our draw method so far has brought in and displayed the background image, but we're still missing the sun. And so let's think back to where we want the sun to be and think about where that location is in that grid of coordinates that we have for specifying positions on our canvas. And so we want the sun to be somewhere in the top left of our picture. And we before talked about how that's roughly around 50, x equals 50, y equals 50, which is about a quarter of the way across and maybe a quarter of the way down. And maybe we want to tweak it so it's a little bit higher up, and so we want maybe a fifth of the way down. And so what we want to think about is how to specify the location of the center of the sun in this x and y space. And we're going to do it dynamically so that the sun stays in that top left corner and visible even as the user of our application might resize the window. Okay, and so we're not going to use fixed numbers like 50 pixels across or 50 pixels down. We're going to use relative coordinates relative to those variables, width or height of the canvas. All right, so let's think about where we might want to put it. And about a quarter of the way across and a fifth of the way down seems like an about right position for the sun. So now we need to go ahead and place the sun there, and we use a library method ellipse to draw an ellipse in the locations x and y. So the coordinates of the center of the ellipse are the first two parameters of the method. But then we have two other parameters as well, and so the second two parameters are the actual width of the ellipse and the height of the ellipse. So if those two parameters happen to be equal, then we're going to get a circle. And if those parameters are unequal, then we'll get an ellipse that's maybe flatter or longer. Okay, and so a thought question, something to keep in mind. With this particular method, will what we're drawing always be a true circle? Or can you think of a situation where what we've specified over here will actually look like a flattened ellipse or a tall ellipse? All right, so that's something to keep in mind. But let's keep going with our example, with our application. And if we run the code as it is right now, we see we get our circle in the top left corner, but it's white. Okay, and so here is where we get to the dynamic part that we want to change as this application runs. And what we'd like to change is the color of the sun. And so now we're getting to the nitty-gritty of how we want the color to change that now that we've displayed the shapes. Okay, so let's think about how we're going to specify the sun. And this is a super common way of coding colors in programming languages. So it's used in web development, it's used in Java, it's used all over the place. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify a color by specifying three values that describe the color: the amount of red in it, the amount of green in it, and the amount of blue in it. So we think of a color as being decomposed into three channels, R, G, B. Okay, and so we want that sunny yellow color, and so we need to talk about how much red will be in there, how much green will be in there, how much blue will be in there. And the smallest amount of a color that we can specify is 0. We can say we don't want any, for example, blue, or we don't want any green. And the maximum amount is 255. And that 255 is, there's a reason for it. It seems like a random number. There's a reason for it. You can look it up. But it's there for a reason. And it's the maximum value for a color channel in the RGB coding. Okay, so for the particular color that we care about, it turns out that we are going to get
Она так увлекательно рассказывает, что я даже уже не могу.
If we have the red set to its maximum value 255, the blue set it to its minimum value 0, because blue's kind of cold color, we don't want to get this particular shade, and the green is helping that red go off to yellow, so the green is pretty high as well. Now, you don't need to know how to design colors. It's kind of fun. You can play around with these three values and see what colors you can create, but you can use Google and just put in the search string HTML color selector or RGB codes, color selectors, and you'll get
Она будет сейчас рассказывать еще полчаса про цвета. Очень интересно, как работает RGB. Да, самое интересное, что ты не можешь пропустить. Потом будут вопросы.
Okay, so if we set the fill or the pen color, you can think of the drawing to be 255-2090, i.e. the color specified by the RGB code, where R level is 255, G level is 209, and B level is 0, and then draw the ellipse, then the ellipse is filled with that color. And so then we get our beautiful sun, just like we wanted in the top left corner of Hoya Shores Beach. Okay, well that's great for the static version, but now we want that sun to change color over time. So at 7 o'clock, when it's beautiful sunset, we want maybe a pinker sun, and then as dusk comes, we want it gray. And the way that we can get our application to change is by remembering that crucial fact that when we have the methods
Солнце. Солнце, тупо солнце. Я просто не понял, что значит fill. Она просто написала типа fill. И типа вылезло солнышко. Что? Почему сначала fill, потом eclipse? И eclipse не привязан к fill.
So I'm going to leave that as a tease for you. I want you to try and implement it. And in one of the support videos that we have coming up, Christina is going to work through how to draw a similar method. And then we'll be right back at you for tweaking the example that she shows you to getting this application to work. And you can do it. But I want you to keep in mind that central paradigm of setup being run once, and then draw anything dynamic
Модуля 2 нету, что ли?
is going to be in that draw method because it gets executed over and over and over again. Okay, so that was one big central message from this example. The second really important message that I want you to get from these videos is documentation is our friend. So
Нет, здесь типа будет без этого, без практического задания, что?
This wonderful brotherhood and sisterhood of programmers all around the world,
Главное, что солнце.
developing libraries together, and we want to use each
Не, ну я просто реально не понял,
experience,
а что значит фил? А что фил-то? А что все перезагрузилось-то?
all around the world, developing code together, developing libraries together, and we want to use each other's experience, expertise, and draw from the work that we've all done together. And the way we can do that is by describing what methods we have and what they do. And so the APIs, the libraries, are what tell us what methods are available in a library, so that's like our index to the library, but also what we can use those methods to do and what functionality they have. So for the processing library, for the library that we've been using up until now to create applets and to draw shapes on them, the documentation is on your screen right now. And in the next lesson of this module, we'll be taking it one step further and thinking about how processing can be used as the backbone for some more sophisticated visual applications that also involve real-time data coming in.
Что мы выяснили? RGB, G, green, зеленый. Все? Типа я охуеть какой умный? Классно. Продолжаем. Продолжай, рассказывай.
So I remember first starting to write code, and at the beginning I was told that documentation is really important and that we should comment everything. And not just the step-by-step comment, but also when we first define a method, that there should be a little description in Java doc that other people might be able to use. And this other people notion was just sort of vaguely said by, oh, by the way, someone might want to use your method. I always thought it was kind of silly because if we do the other recommendations and name variables appropriately and the name of the method should maybe be something that's natural, then who would need the documentation?
Кому нужна документация? Правильно. Хуяриком на код.
And using libraries, and all of a sudden I was reading other people's documentation, and when they didn't put very much in there other than the name of the method or the name of the variables, it would be really frustrating. I'd have to do a whole lot of testing and trial and error to figure out what these methods are doing. And so I learned the hard way that documentation is really important.
Чувак, ты понял, блядь, документация это важно, пидорасы, блядь. Расстрелять их всех.
All right, now we get to have some fun. In that last video that Mia presented, she showed you how to work with GUIs in Java, and specifically using the processing library. And in this video, we're going to actually write some code together to create a fun little GUI. So I hope you're
читай документацию, блядь.
You should navigate to the package, to the project where you've got all the code set up for this class that we set up in Module 1, and you'll be ready to get started. Okay, so we're going to get started by creating a new package to place our code in. So let's go over here to our source folder, and I'll right click and I'll create a new package. So here's my new package. I'm going to call my package GUI module. Okay, so I've got a new package to put my new class in.
О, тут что-то это. Что-то интересное, что ли, началось?
It's a good idea to organize your classes in packages so they don't just become a mess.
Да, супер качество.
So inside this new class, or new package, I am going to create a new class. So I go over
Лучше не стало.
and say new class. And I'll call my class my display and create it. So here's my new class.
Ну так все более-менее.
So let me get rid of this window here because I don't need it anymore. So I've got my new class all set up, and if you remember back from Mia's video, the way
Можно я посмотрю 6-ю минуту и посмотрю, к чему все это приведет?
if I want white, I can change these colors to these channels to all
Типа
their
она
maximum value,
использует
which
и
is
делает этот вывод. Окей. Я понял.
And you can see that I'm going to get a
Тогда хорошо. Тогда продолжай рисовать, там ничего
So there's my white
интересного.
background. And I can play around with the color here. I can change it to red by making the blue and the green channels both 0. And run again. So there's my red background. And I can keep playing around to get other combinations of red, green, and blue. But if you get tired of playing around, there are plenty of sites on the internet that you can go to. Here's one that I like that will allow you to pick pick a color visually, and then it tells you what its RGB value is. So if I like this nice kind of teal color, I can see that its red, green, blue value are in those boxes below. And I can copy those values out into my processing window. Okay, so I want my background to be just a kind of plain gray. So I'll put it at 200, 200, 200. And incidentally, whenever I have a red, green, blue value that are all the same, I'll get some shade of gray. The lower the numbers, the closer to black. The higher the numbers, the closer to white.
Я так полагаю, что Oracle очень любит RGB. Но это не от Oracle уж прям от самого курса, это так. Хотя я даже не знаю, кто их разработчик, этих курсов. Сама Курсера. Я понимаю, Курсера это же агрегаторы, я как понимаю, курсов. Они же не сами их пишут. Да умри ты, блядь, уже. Веселое лицо, блядь, мы сейчас будем рисовать. Охуеть. Мне интересно, чувак, который писал, что он год все это проходил. Что именно эти курсы от Oracle. Значит, у меня очень большие шансы попасть в его программиста.
The first thing I'll need is a head. So I need to draw a head on my canvas, and I want my head to be a circle. So I don't know how to draw a circle. I don't remember. So I'm going to go back over to my processing documentation. And if I go back to that overview screen, I see that processing provides me with a whole bunch of methods for drawing shapes. And I've got some built-in what are called 2D primitives here. And I can see that one of those primitives allows me to draw an ellipse. So I click on that, and I see that, okay, it's pretty easy. I just call the ellipse method. I pass it in 4 values, and those values are the x and y coordinates of the ellipse, and then the width and height of the ellipse. So let me go back.
Тоже нашел эти курсы на Хабре, где чел из Германии Java учил 1,5 года? Да. Именно по ней и сюда и пришел. Ты думаешь, что это реклама Курсеры?
There, need my semicolon, and let's see what that looks like. Alright, so when I put my ellipse on there, I see that I get, by default, I get a white ellipse, or circle in this case, since the height and width are the same. And it's appearing at x.
Давай, ты там дорисуешь свою розницу. Рожицу уже.
I can see that he now smiles without such a full grin. And I can change the parameters to make the smile
Рожу дорисовали. За это платят 5000 баксов в месяц. Я готов.
I hope you'll play around with this. Now that you've got these basic methods that you can play around with, you can have a lot of fun. So go ahead, make something really interesting, and just have fun playing with it.
Даже задумался насчет этих курсов после этой статьи. Я пока решил поиграть на Java Rush. Ну, попробуй поиграть на Java Rush. Но, на мой взгляд, она вообще того не стоит. Вот это поворот. Ретрить колотить. Давай следующий видос, там рассказывай, рисуй смайлики. Вот этот поворот. Типа для драчков. Ну, для драчков, ну, блин, слушай, не знаю, Java Rush тоже там вообще отвратительные примеры. На самом деле. Прикольно.
All right, so now we're going to look at the example that Mia presented in her video on your introduction to GUIs. And that example was to display an image and then put a sun on top of that image by putting an ellipse there and change the color of that ellipse depending on the time. She talked about using hours.
А, про Java Rush. Ну да, там прям совсем все плохо.
So I've modified that example slightly so that the sun color is going to change based on the second of the minute. So you can see here, as I open up this application, I see my beach scene, that already has a sun in it, but my sun that I placed on top of it is now changing color every second. So it's getting darker and darker and darker, and in a minute you'll see it get lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes back to its yellow color. So let's take a look at the code that makes that happen. Here it is. Of course, it's a GUI, so my class needs to extend the papplet class, which is my base class for implementing all of my GUIs. And I'm going to implement these two fundamental methods here, the setup method and the draw method. I've got all the code written, I'm just going to walk you through it. So the setup method is for all.
Ну, курсир довольно-таки мощный курс по Java Info. Ну, по сравнению с Java Rush, так вообще. Много наслышно. Слушай, ну здесь вот прям начало интересно, то есть здесь сразу пошло наследование, сразу пошли какие-то классы, методы и все такое, то есть нет такого, что там сейчас мы изучим тип int, а потом мы изучим, что такое double, а потом мы узнаем там, что такое строка. То есть прям, ну, вот это вот мыло, оно сразу пройдено.
At the heart of this code, all we're doing is we're calculating a custom color here on the screen, and then we're filling the ellipse with that color that we're about to create, and then we're going to create the ellipse. So I'm going to talk about creating
Вот это вот удивительно, что вот на третьей неделе здесь вот это вот какая-то возня.
the ellipse to be based on the width and the height of the window. So we're taking the ratio of the width and the height of the window over 4 and over 5 to basically position the ellipse and to size it according to the height of the window. So if the window were bigger, that ellipse would be bigger. And you have access to these width and height member variables since you're working inside a class that extends the papplet class. Those get set automatically for you when you call the size method. So that's just a way we can kind of make things a little bit more flexible in terms of how big our window is, rather than setting the width and height, or sorry, setting the size of the ellipse.
Ты не чувствуешь себя дебилом?
But really the
Ну да.
interesting thing here is how the color gets set. So the color
Здесь хоть
gets
какой-то,
set
ну, код
through
прям
the
самый,
super method
ну,
called
правда, с
sun
RGB,
color
конечно, они
set. So
перегнули.
let's take a look at what sun color
Но
set
дальше
is.
там будет интересно.
Well, the
Здесь
first
сразу
thing
же
it does
какую-то
is it takes the
библиотеку
argument,
распаковываешь, там
and it
карты,
takes the
какие-то
argument,
точки,
which
прям
is a
запускаешь
call to this built-in
приложение.
method called second. And what this
На
built-in
Гугле
method
нас
called
забанили,
second does
и
is
я
it
пошел
returns
этот.
the number of seconds that have elapsed
На
since
Гугле
the last
забанили,
minute,
присоединились
according
к
to your
картам
business.
Microsoft, по
So that's built in
картам
for you, you
Microsoft
can
что-то
use
там
it.
пошли
There's
возить там
a similar method called
туда-сюда.
minute and another method called hour that do just what you expect. So based on the number of seconds that have elapsed since the last minute, we can calculate a color, a version of yellow, either very dark or very light, depending on those number of seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of base everything on how close to the sort of bottom of the minute we are. So how close to 30 seconds are we in terms of the number of seconds that have elapsed? So the very first thing I'm going to do in this method, well, first I'm going to create my integer array that holds 3 integers, and that's going to be the red, green, and blue values that I'll be returning. And then I'm going to calculate the difference between the seconds that have elapsed and 30. I don't care if they're positive or negative. I just
Девка,
want to know
походу,
the distance.
кандидатскую
So I'm going to
защитила
call
по
the
рисованию смайликов в Еве.
function, which is going to calculate the absolute value of that number. And I'll
Это
store that
точно
in a
не
variable
реклама
called
курсера.
distance30.
Это же
Then I want to calculate a ratio
А то я
in terms
достаю
of
свою
how
карточку.
far
Слушай,
around
я
you are with.
ни рубля не
So I'm
заплатил.
going to
Ну, я на
divide
халяву
15
сижу, смотрю.
by 30. So if
И
I'm
больше даже
exactly
скажу, что
at
если они попросят
30, then my
3000, я,
diff from 30 is
ну,
0, and I'll
если
have
они не
0
дадут
divided by
курсы на
30,
халяву, я
and
не
my
буду их
ratio will be
смотреть.
0. If I'm all the way up at 30, then my diff from 30 is going to be 30. Sorry, if I'm all the
Привязывай
way up
карточку
like
какой-нибудь
far
виртуальный, на
away
которой
from
денег
30,
точно
so
не
either at
будет.
0 or 60, then diff from 30 is going to be 30, and I'll have 30 divided by 30, which is 1. So this is going to be a number between 0 and 1, depending on how far away I am from 30. Then I'll use that ratio to scale the red and the green values of yellow to create a color that's either very dark or
Считаю,
very
что он
light.
того не стоит.
So
Ну,
if my ratio is very
3200
close
в
to
месяц
1,
за вот
then I'm
это
going to be
нет.
multiplying 255 by
Если
something
за
close to
9
1,
можно
I'm going to
взять
get a very big
реального
color for my
человека,
red and
который
my
будет
green.
тебе помогать. Вот от
And my blue is always going to be 0, because a pure
Fox
yellow
Minded.
color would be 255,
То есть там за
255.
девятку тебе
So
реального
a
человека
bright
дают,
yellow
реальную
is
программу.
going
То
to
есть он
happen when
тебе и
that
на русском
ratio is very
объяснит.
close to 1.
Здесь ты можешь
And
начать
then a
что-нибудь
dark
тупить
yellow
в
or
связи
a
с тем, что
black is going
английского
to happen when
уровень
that
большой
ratio
будет.
is very close to 0.
Ну,
So when
такое.
my ratio is very close to 0, it's going to multiply by
Я
25,
не
a very
буду
small
платить
number,
3000.
and I'll end
Если
up
на
with a
халяву
color that's
дадут,
very close to
хорошо.
black or even black itself, 0, 0, 0. Now you'll notice that I'm also casting the result of this multiplication to an int because my array can only store integers. So I have to do this cast to do the type conversion.
3200 точно
Once
нет.
I've got all those three values set, I return my array
Причем я еще не понимаю, там 3200 ты платишь за один курс или за месячную подписку и на любое количество курсов. Тут большой вопрос.
It will change the ellipse as it goes.
И ты говоришь, можно купить себе раба за 9к. Fox Minded, по-моему, как так называется. Fox Minded. Это украинский раб будет твой. True Online Learning. И вот у них есть QA, Android, Java. То есть они реально то, что сейчас используется, демонстрируют то, что прям популярно. Во-первых, во-вторых, на русском. Без всяких там этих проблем. То есть и 10 дней, как я понимаю, у них есть пробного периода. Вот мы сейчас собираемся и будем вместе идти.
Why do I need to know all these details about processing when really I want to become
У нас в Дискорде есть этот. Вот я группку создал. Сюда набьем народ и будем здесь. Уже тут будет обсуждение.
And sometimes that means using libraries like processing. And that's a good thing. So as you use these libraries as you develop your code, you're not necessarily going to become an expert in one particular library, but you want to become proficient and comfortable enough in figuring out what pieces of those libraries are going to be useful for your project. And so what we're doing now is building on our confidence and comfort level with processing so we can apply that knowledge to building the graphical application that displays geospatial data on earthquakes around the world.
Звучит неплохо. Ну да, там еще дальше есть практика, то есть там дальше есть возможность реальную практику получить на реальном проекте. То есть, а это вообще кайф. То есть это довольно-таки, ну, интересно.
So the last lesson we talked a lot about the processing library. And we've had some people ask us, hey, is this a course about processing or about Java? What's going on here? Why do I need to know all these details about processing when really I want to become a confident Java software engineer? And there's a lot of merit to that. But what we're hoping that you get out of this course is how to use whichever tools are at your disposal to come up with a really exciting project or product that you want to build. And sometimes that means using libraries like processing. And
О,
that's a
сука.
good thing. So as you use these libraries as you develop your code, you're not necessarily going to become an expert in one particular library, but you want to become proficient and comfortable enough in figuring out what pieces of those libraries are going to be useful for your project. And so what we're doing now is building on our confidence and comfort level with processing so we can apply that knowledge to building the graphical application that displays geospatial data and earthquakes around the world.
Как так-то? Долго там еще эти видосы будут идти? Бесконечные. Здесь видос. Вся третья неделя это один сплошной видос. Здесь на несколько, сколько-то, полтора часа, что ли, видос.
In this support video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about documentation and how you'll be using it throughout this course, particularly in the homework assignment, the programming assignment that you'll get started on at the end of this module. So in the last lesson, I showed you this page for the processing documentation, and it has a bunch of methods that you find really useful when you're trying to draw shapes and change the colors of your GUI display. So let me just highlight a few. It's a pretty big page. The few that we looked at, so we're here in this 2D primitives. We want to look at ellipses, lines, rectangles, so on and so forth. We've got the color methods over here. You can change the background color, you can change the still color of shapes, so on and so forth. And you can play with any of these methods if you want, but let me give you a couple more that you might find useful, particularly in implementing the key of that map, which is these typography functions down here. So these are methods that you can use to draw text on your GUI. So in particular, this method here, text, that's what's going to create a little box where you can put some text on the display. And then down here are a bunch of methods that allow you to change the attributes of that
Я даже первый.
And again, with any of these methods, the best way to get to know how to use them is to click on them, and it'll take you to a page that gives you a whole bunch of examples on how to call that method and what visual
Не все какой-то красивости гуя, какой-то конкретной библиотеки рассматривают. Чисто психанули парни, девки.
So this is at this URL that you open up in your programming assignment, unfoldingmaps.org/javadoc, and it gives you information about all of the classes and methods that are built into the Unfolding Maps library. And this is a library that you downloaded as part of that starter code that you set up. But it can be pretty overwhelming because it seems to have a lot going on here. So let me help you navigate. What you see up here in this corner right here, this is all of the classes, all of the packages that are defined in the Unfolding Maps library. And as you know from looking at the Eclipse starter code, packages are just little ways to organize your classes so that they're a little bit more organized.
Можно я дальше пойму? Я понимаю, как с документацией работать.
Here is every class.
О, расскажи мне что-нибудь, пухляш.
People always say that it's important to document your code, but we don't always talk about why. And there's a couple different reasons we do it. One is because you want your code to be usable by other people. If you've written the world's best library for string parsing or other stuff like that, but no one can figure out how to use it, it's no good. And so there's one reason right there. Documentation might be in the form of an external document, a how-to guide, a design document, or something like that, or it might be in the form of something as simple as documents inside of your code, saying, here's how you use this function. These are what we're looking for these parameters. There's other reasons for documenting your code too, though. Somebody once said you should always code as if the person who ends up maintaining your code will be a violent psychopath who knows where you live. That's a little extreme. I haven't run into too many violent psychopaths in my professional career, but it is something to bear in mind. You're writing code that other people are going to have to maintain, and so this means not just writing documentation for the parts that other folks will use. Here's how you use my object, or here's how you call this function. but it's also writing documentation for.
Чел, вы рассказываете какую-то хуйню.
You make choices like that. You make design decisions and do it. And the best time to get.
So now we're ready to lay the foundation for the specific graphical application that you're doing for the project. And so remember that what we'll be doing here is placing earthquake data around the world. By the end of this sequence of videos, you'll be able to place markers on a map of the world that you're displaying and format those markers in whichever way you choose. Now, the way that you'll be doing that is by really delving deeply into the documentation for Java processing, for unfolding maps, and really learning how to become comfortable using other people's code and their interfaces in developing your own project. So all of this is in the service of the really cool project that we hope you're excited about diving into. So let's start by thinking about the map that we want to build and the information that we want to lay over top of it. And if you think back to how Christine introduced the ideas behind objects and classes, we really want to think about our map as representing real-world data and modeling that real-world data with the
Ой, мы точечки
with
еще
the
будем
Java
расставлять.
constructs that
Неужели
we
что-то
use. So
интересное?
some of those real-world objects that we care about include things like location and geographical information, and then those points of interest that we want to highlight using markers. In our case, those points of interest are earthquakes. So let's think about how we implement some of this in Java, and we've got the two phases of the project being setting up the map and then adding the content to that map. So thinking back to our graphical applications from the previous lesson, we know that the papplet class lets us display data visually, and so when we want to customize that display, we can extend the data type papplet. And so our skeleton code for this new Java class would have the name of the class, and just a reminder that the class name needs to be the name of the file that we're saving this code in. So our file name would be earthquakecitymap.java. Now in this class, what we need to define
половину
in
только
order to
прослушал, что
specify how
час
we're
видосов.
customizing the output are the two special methods that we have, the setup method and the draw method. Notice that right now in the skeleton code we also
Я даже не
have
знаю, может сейчас остановиться на этом
declared a
видосе,
private instance variable that
чтобы
will be
завтра
referred
нормально
to,
зайти.
and
Потому
it's
что
a
сейчас уже
variable of
полвторого.
type unfolding map. And so
Получается,
let's
сколько?
see
3
how we
часа
fill
стрим
in some
идет.
of this skeleton code and
2,5
what that
часа
all means.
полезного
As we're
использования.
getting more
Ну,
comfortable
учесть,
with
что
this code, we
полчаса
want to
уходило
trace
на какую-то
through it
дичь.
and see what the methods are doing and why they are placed in the code where they're placed. So take a moment, please, and see which of these methods you recognize from the previous work that we've done and which ones seem new.
Какой метод в этом коде снайпит? Снайпит кам. Отрезок. Отрывок, обрезок. И, короче, пришел из главной библиотеки. Почему from unfolding. Не понял. Какой из этих методов в фрагменте ведется в библиотеке процессинг, который из разворачивается как из, а какой из ни одного? Чего? Вы сами-то поняли. Продолжить.
Okay, so let's start with the familiar methods, and you'll notice that some of these methods we used before when we were building just a simple graphical application by extending papplet before from the processing library. And for example, the size method that we're using here in setup lets us specify the dimensions of the canvas that we're displaying. And the background method in the draw method that we've got here lets us specify the background color of the canvas. So those methods we're familiar with. Now, in order to implement the project that we care about that has quite a much more sophisticated output than just some colors on a canvas, what we're using is the Unfolding Maps library. And that library gives us access to a whole array of new data types. And one of those data types that's very important, that's sort of at the crux of what we'll be doing, is the map object itself. So that data type is called Unfolding Map, and you see that we're using the constructor to build an Unfolding Map type object in the second line of the setup method. So as we're building that object, we need to tell Java some parameter information about the object that we want to create. So some of those parameters indicate the size of the map that we want to display, and so we have the height and the width dimensions.
Нормально, не со шрифтами поработали.
But that map is going to be associated with a canvas, and so we need to tell the display where on that canvas to locate the map. And so we need to also give the coordinates of the map in the canvas. Now notice in the particular example that we're working on right now, the map is much smaller than the canvas, and there's a reason for that. Remember that in the project for this week, what we'll be doing is putting the map and a key for that map together on the same canvas, and so we can't have the map taking up the entire space. The other piece of the puzzle that we need to specify when we're building a new unfolding map object is where that unfolding map object learns about the map features, in particular the boundaries of continents, for example, or countries, or any road data that we want to display in our map. And in order to do that, Unfolding Maps has this infrastructure of map providers, and for now we could just use this long constructor as a bit of a magical incantation with all of its parameters, and we know that if we want to display a map, that last parameter needs to be a new map provider, and we're choosing to use the Google Map provider. So one of the things that you're working with in some of the end of module
Меня в Гугле забанили.
playing with the different map providers and seeing what the effects of that would look
И
like.
это не шутка.
Now, as we continue setting up our map, we are modifying the map object that we just created. We're calling a method on it that says zoom to level, and we're specifying the level 2. We can choose the default zoom level of the map that we're using. Now, for those of you who are working through this course offline, you'll notice that we've put in some functionality for you. We've put in
А
some
мы сейчас
options
пытались
for
к
you
гугловским
that let
картам
you
обратиться,
still work
и
and
там было очень
program
много обращений.
without
Google
accessing
расценил это
Google
как
Map
DDoS-атаку
providers online in real-time
и
whilst
на
you're,
24
running
часа
your
забанил
applets.
мой айпишник.
You will have to be a little careful though with zoom levels. So in particular, the
Ну,
offline
именно
version
Google,
of the
Google карты
map only
забанили.
has 3 zoom levels. Now,
Вот
some of
тебе
those
могу показать,
methods
как
then
выглядит
allow
Google
us
карта у
to
меня сейчас. Это просто нечто. То есть через VPN захожу, нормально. VPN убираю, и, предположим, я хочу... А, сейчас, или уже разбанили. Не, разбанили, походу. Со Stack Overflow было. Ну, вот оно... Там даже написано в этом было. В туториале о том, что такое возможно.
And the map-utils library also lets us do that. So the map-utils.create default event dispatcher basically sounds like magic at the moment, but we'll talk more about events later on in the course. And what this event dispatcher does is it makes our map come to life in the sense that we can double-click on it and change the zoom level. We can drag and drop the map. We can zoom to different parts of the world. And so without us having to write up a whole bunch of code to implement that functionality, by using what other people have done, we can already boost the interactivity of our application. We're using another method from the map object in the draw method, and notice that in the draw method, as soon as we've set the color, what we've said is map.draw. And map.draw is actually a very powerful method. In that one line, what we're saying is take the map object and anything that's associated with it and refresh the view of that map object. And what you'll see as we go ahead and customize our map is that instead of drawing each one of the new pieces that we've
То есть на
added
Java
to
Rush у тебя
our
получается
application
больше работы
every
с
time we invoke the draw
просто
method,
с
what we're going
методами,
to do
которые
is
есть в стандартной
associate each
библиотеке.
one of those
А
new
здесь у
pieces
тебя
to the map
получается
object,
сторонняя
and the
библиотека, и ты
map.draw
с ней прям
template
работаешь. Ну
will
прям
refresh them all.
наполовину
So
проект
we've talked
какой-то
in a
такой
fair amount of
получается.
detail about a lot of the methods that you see here in the starter code, but there's one yet that we haven't defined or discussed, and that's the add key method.
У меня к Java Rush есть личная привязанность, поэтому у меня даже есть небольшой, как сказать-то, посыл к их каналу. Если вот сюда нажать на мою картинку, оп, здесь будет такая классная картинка.
Where you'll be filling in the body of that method in this class. So as we trace through the code, it's important to know what all the methods are doing, not just where they come from. And so now that we have a sense of what each of the methods do individually, let's think about what we expect to see when we run a piece of code like this in Eclipse.
Понял,
So
принял.
let's start by predicting what you would expect to see.
What did you predict will happen if you run this code snippet in Eclipse? Какой код-то? Чё? What? Я такой просто... Фотка негритенка была такая, ну, такого темнокожего мальчика, который такой, типа, там, шо, какие пилюли, типа, там. И такой, у меня такая же сейчас картина, какой код. Run this code. Какой this code? Чё this code? What code? Видишь, такое же состояние. Вот этот, что ли?
Okay.
Значит, вы бы его туда хотя бы перенесли. Какой код-то? Что? Я его должен в голове держать? Это кей? Я не понимаю, что значит это кей. Ёк. Ой. Спатеньки хочется. Нет, ни координат, ничего. Куда он добавит ключ? Какой ключ? Из чего? Кейдж, ты что, нажатие на клавишу? Что это? Непонятно.
So what you probably predicted was a canvas that has a background that is almost completely black and which displays a map that doesn't take up the whole canvas, but that shows up on the canvas. Now, my question is...
Вот опять что она сама перезагрузилась? Что за фигня?
So let's start by predicting what you would expect to see.
Опять? Опять? Что? Skip.
Okay, so what you probably predicted
Опять меня не поняли, думаю, наверное, тупой, надо ему перезагрузить страницу. Пусть читает заново.
That doesn't take up the whole canvas, but that shows up on the canvas. Now, my question is, what if we wanted to display something just a little bit different? For example, if we wanted this to be our canvas, what would we need to do?
Какую часть кода надо изменить, чтобы все вывелось на экран? Ну, блять, код будете показывать-то или нет? Я его в голове должен держать? Закройте его картой вообще. Я вам потом как-нибудь расскажу.
And you might remember that in the processing library documentation, we have the definition of the background method and its various parameters. And if we want to switch our color from almost black to gray, what we could do is just pick a value for the gray level that is much closer to white. So for example, if we picked a value like, say, 220 or 230, then we'd achieve the effect of having a light gray background like we were anticipating. So at this point, we've done a really thorough job of setting
От цвета фона зависит от того, будет это работать или нет.
So that's what we'll do next.
Спасибо. Девушка, больше не приходите, пожалуйста. Блять, опять ты.
So we're going to continue building our map application displaying earthquakes, and we're ready to start adding content to the map that we set up before. So then the question is, how do we add that content? And we know that our map is, well, it's part of a class that extends papplet. And so the two main methods that we've got where we're doing a lot of the hard work are the setup method and the draw method. And so it's a question, where do we put the definitions of all of these new objects that we want to create that will let us point at various parts in the map?
Запомнили или запомните, что мы недавно выучили о методе установить или нарисовать. Какое выполняется только разово, а какой повторяется. Ладненько, спасибо за времяпровождение. Да не за что. Да я сейчас тоже скоро спать пойду. Сейчас буквально еще, наверное, минут 5-10 и на боковую. Может, тоже тут мудохаться тут еще. Ну, тут, кстати, дальше уже пойдет что-то интересное. Хотя нет, ни хрена интересного. Здесь чисто все в видосах. Ну, можно будет разогнаться как раз. Здесь будет на полчасика, на 40, на 50 минут видео. Блять, на следующий раз пиздец все это оставлять. Не хочется, ну ладно. Draw вызывается разово. Сетап несколько раз. Наверное, так. Наоборот. Сетап вызывается разово. Draw повторяется. Окей.
And remember that the setup method gets executed exactly once at the beginning of when the p-applet is launched, whereas the draw method gets executed over and over again every time we want to refresh the view. And all of these objects that we're creating, the pointers to various milestones and features of the map, we don't want to create a new object every time the screen gets refreshed. What we'd love to do is just have a single instance of those class that represents a particular point that we're thinking about, and have that point somehow associated with the map as a whole. And then every time we need to refresh the map, we just say, hey, refresh everything that we've already created. And so for that reason, all of these definitions, all of the work that we're about to do will get put in the setup method. And then when we execute the map.draw method within the p-applet's draw method, that map.draw method will go through all the objects that are associated with or attached to a map object and will refresh them as well. So let's think about adding a specific marker to denote a particularly significant earthquake that happened in Chile in 1960. And so what we'd like to do perhaps is indicate that location as something of note, and then put a dot on that location in our graphical representation. So let's think about some code that we could use to do that. And in the first line of code, notice that we're working with coordinates, which should be a little bit familiar to you from what Christine was doing earlier. So one of the great things about working with a library of methods and data types that were special built for a particular purpose is that a lot of the data types that we would naturally need have been defined for us already. And location is one of those examples. So in our earlier videos, we actually defined a class called simple location, and we tried to build in some of the functionality that locations ought to have. But we see over here in the documentation for unfolding maps that we already have that in the location class. And so notice that there are a couple of different constructors depending on which parameters we want to use, and then some public methods that we can use to both access and modify some of the properties of the location objects. So the first thing that we would want to do when putting a marker on this significant earthquake on its location in the world is to create a location object and set its coordinates to be the coordinates of the epicenter. Now once we have that location object, that still isn't associated with the map, and the way that we can associate or highlight a particular location on the map is to create a marker. So a marker is, well, it's what you think it might mean. And this is the beauty of having our Java objects mirror and be really models for the real life object, so that our code is readable and intuitive. So a simple point marker represents a single location, and it represents it using a circle. Now notice that there's something else in this documentation. Notice the documentation points out that the simple point marker implements something called a marker, and it's an interface called a marker. Now, an interface is something that indicates that we're dealing with an abstract data type. It's like a promise between the programmer and the person using the library's code that any data type that is of that implements the abstract data type marker will have certain behaviors, will allow certain functionalities. And what the interface lets us do is hide some of the details of the implementation of how those functionalities are actually put into practice. So in our particular application, we don't really care whether our marker is a simple point marker or some other kind of marker. All we care about is that it's a way of denoting a specific location on the map. And so in our code, what we might say is that the variable val of type marker gets assigned to the object of type simple point marker. So when we're creating an object, we have to give it a concrete data type so that it can actually use the specific details of the implementation. About is that it's a way of denoting a specific location on the map. And so in our code, what we might say is that the variable val of type marker gets assigned to the object of type simple point marker. So when we're creating an object, we have to give it a concrete data type so that it can actually use the specific details of the implementation of that class. But when we're going to be using or pointing to that object, all we'll need to know about it is that it's some kind of marker. And in particular, what we'll be doing with it is adding that marker to our map so that it gets displayed, and so that then when we execute the draw method, that marker will show up on our map. And so what we see is the map that displays the location of the Chile earthquake, and coming up we'll add richer data and more data.
Adding marker to map for a particular location. Which objects did we add to map? Походу это надо будет заново повторять. Что-то какой-то бронебойный, блядь. Да. Пора на боковушечку. Чё? Понятно.
So right now what we had was a map with a single gray dot on it to indicate the epicenter of the Chile earthquake. But really where our map comes to life is when we add changing data based on the current earthquake data from around the world. And what we'd like to do that then is think about handling and displaying multiple markers and having those markers be customized based on properties of the earthquakes. And so let's think about how we can get to that level. So in order to deal with more complicated data and more complicated displays on our maps, it can be useful to separate two aspects of the data. We can separate out the properties that we're thinking of defining an earthquake from how we might want to represent visually those properties or that earthquake. And unfolding maps actually lets us do that in a very clean way using different data types. So one of these data types we're more familiar with, the marker interface, that tells us about how to place dots on particular locations in the map, and then how to style those dots. And so we've already talked about that, but the new piece that we're going to add in now is the feature class. And this feature class is a way of grouping together certain properties and saying this collection of information is somehow connected, and I want to encapsulate it in a single object. And so what we might do if we're thinking a little bit further about that important Chilean.
Короче, где-то вот тут завязываем с этим. Раз начал ебланить. Окей. И все. Слишком